Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Roxana Vargas. Roxana Vargas was born on September 11, 1988. Venezuela, she grew up in a warm and loving family, with her older sister Mariana and parents Antonio and Ana Teresa. At 17, she graduated from the school at the dawn of the ball and received a scholarship from the Gran Mar Riscal Foundation to study social communications at the Catholic University of Santa Rosa in Caracas. So she and Mariana moved to the capital to live with their grandmother, who already lived there. Their parents frequently traveled to Caracas to visit them, cherishing the time spent together. By 2008, Roxana was in her 8th semester at the Faculty of Social Communications. She was also involved in the production of the well-known program Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. One of the last messages on her phone was sent on July 12, 2008. Said she was on her way to meet a friend at Plaza Venezuela. At the time, she was in the Chacom area, but then she disappeared. Initially, detectives suspected that she might have been a victim of a robbery or kidnapping. This suspicion comes from the quick kidnappings, where criminals would abduct victims for a few hours to demand a ransom, releasing them afterward. Unfortunately, many of these incidents ended tragically, with some victims being killed if their families could not pay the ransom. Investigators have ruled out a kidnapping. As Roxana's family has not received a ransom demand, they then considered the possibility of a robbery, but there was no evidence to support this theory either. On July 14, 2008, the body of a girl was discovered by a security guard working at the Biosa Airline building, now known as Conviasa. Located in the Caiza Park area of Caracas, the guard heard loud barking from dogs near a vacant lot close to his workplace and decided to investigate. Upon approaching the lot, he found the lifeless body of a girl lying amidst a pile of construction debris. Shocked by the discovery, he immediately contacted a criminal investigation agency. Detectives arrived at the scene and determined that the body was buried under rubble, stones, wooden boards, and other waste. Forensic experts conducted an initial examination and concluded that the girl had been dead for approximately 36 to 48 hours. Her face was disfigured, and one of her eyes was dislodged from its socket. The body showed multiple injuries and bruises, but the primary cause of death was determined to be a skull fracture, caused by several blows to the head with a blunt object. The girl was wearing a triangular earring in her left ear, but the matching earring from her right ear was missing. The police quickly identified the victim. On July 13, the day before the body was found, a woman named Anna had reported the disappearance of her 19-year-old daughter, Roxana. Roxana's physical description matched the body, and DNA testing later confirmed her identity. In a conversation with Roxana's mother, Anna, she admitted that she suspected one person. The person she referred to was psychiatrist Edmundo Chirinos. At the time, Edmundo was 73 years old and was a well-known psychiatrist. Highly educated, he earned his surgical diploma in 1958 and graduated as a psychologist in 1960 from the Central University of Venezuela. Additionally, he obtained master's degrees in neuroscience and clinical psychology from prestigious institutions, including Oxford and Cambridge in England, the University of Marseille in France, and Quincy University in New York. By 1961, Edmundo co-founded the School of Psychology at the Central University of Venezuela, and in 1984, he was elected as the university's rector. He has a varied professional background, and he is also actively involved in politics. In 1988, he ran for president as a candidate of the Independent Moral Movement. By 1999, He was a member of the National Constituent Assembly. Due to his impressive academic qualifications, he served as a personal therapist for Presidents Jaime Lucinchi, Rafael Caldera, and Hugo Chavez. He also established a psychiatric clinic called Clin Uesi in La Florida, Caracas. Ana shared with detectives the reasons she suspected Edmundo of killing her daughter. She revealed that Roxana used to date him. She also mentioned that Roxana had been a patient of his, seeking help for postpartum depression after Roxana was diagnosed with depression on October 2, 2007. The family decided to consult a trusted doctor, Edmundo. At that time, Roxana was already struggling with eating disorders. Roxana had long been concerned about her weight, and these thoughts became increasingly distressing for her. Ana said that during her first consultation with Dr. Edmundo, Roxana was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a decision her family felt was made too quickly. Nevertheless, they decided to follow Edmundo's advice when he suggested that Roxana try a method that would increase her sleep time. He believed that this method could solve her problem. The sleep therapy he proposed involved taking small doses of sedatives and sleeping pills over a period of time. When Roxana met Edmundo again for further consultation, he began asking her strange questions, including whether she had a boyfriend. She replied that she did, but this was not true. She had feelings for a young man named Mariana, who did not return her affection. Mariana was also her sister's classmate, and at that time, she only had a friendly relationship with him. Edmundo then inquired if she had been intimate with her boyfriend, to which she truthfully answered no, as she was still a virgin. During their first meeting, Edmundo attempted to get physically closer to Roxana, which felt inappropriate to others, however. She began to notice that his desire for physical closeness with her was becoming more apparent. After one of Roxana's consultations, she asked her mother to take her to the pharmacy to buy sanitary pads because she had unexpectedly started her period. Roxana's mother, Ana, was aware of her daughter's menstrual cycle and knew that this period was not due yet, although this was unusual. Ana remained calm. One day, while Roxana was in another sleep therapy session with Edmundo, Ana waited in the waiting room and met another mother named Luisa, who was also there for her daughter's sleep therapy. They exchanged phone numbers, and during their conversation, Luisa revealed that her daughter had also started her period right after a session. Both speculated that these occurrences might be side effects of the sedatives and psychotropic medications their daughters were taking. On October 15, 2007, Roxana had her last consultation with Dr. Edmundo near the end of the session. She woke up when the sleeping pills she had taken stopped being effective. The first thing she noticed was a bright light shining in her eyes. Then, she felt Edmundo touch her lips and kiss her. In a matter of moments, he removed her underwear and began to assault her. She was in shock and tried to escape. But he quickly stopped her, hugged her, and said that sedatives can sometimes cause hallucinations. When she left the clinic, Roxana went to meet her mother, Ana, and together, they walked to the shopping mall. There, they met her best friend Valentina, seizing the opportunity when her mother was not listening. She told Valentina about what had happened in the clinic. Valentina was so disturbed by Roxana's story that when Roxana went to the restroom, she spoke to Ana about her concerns. When Roxana returned, Ana immediately confronted her, asking what had occurred at Edmundo's office. She recounted the events, though her memory was hazy due to the sedative. After hearing the details, Ana took Roxana to a gynecologist, and the doctor confirmed what Roxana had said. She had always been honest with her mother, so Ana believed that her daughter was not at fault. Roxana's horrifying revelation, coupled with a medical examination, shows that Edmundo took advantage of her. Ana considered suing Edmundo for violence against her daughter, Roxana, but later she felt worried about this decision. She doubted anyone would believe her because Edmundo was a famous and prestigious doctor with many connections in the political world. She worries about the consequences both she and her daughter will face if she files a complaint. After leaving the gynecology clinic, Anna takes Roxana back to Bay del Pasco for a psychological consultation with Dr. Abel. As they are concerned about her mental health, the girl was experiencing insomnia and nervous breakdowns, and she frequently expressed a desire to see Dr. Edmundo. Abel diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder and eating problems, which made her feel anxious and stressed. She underwent treatment with Abel until mid-December 2007, during which she showed significant improvement. As a result, Abel recommended that she return to Caracas to continue her studies. He also advised avoiding any meetings with Edmundo. Anna found a female psychiatrist, Audrey Rusin, at the Scarakis Treatment Center in Caracas now. Roxana could continue regular psychiatric consultations to maintain her mental health, which was a relief for Anna, however. As soon as Roxana returned to Caracas, she started an intimate relationship with Edmundo. This time, their interactions were not about consultations or treatment sessions. In her blog, she described their first encounter and mentioned that their relationship was without commitments. As Edmundo was much older than her, she also shared her feelings for him. However, she felt worried because in his eyes, she was just an object to satisfy his sexual desires. She became more and more emotionally dependent on him over time. Her family and friends realized that this relationship was still going on, and they tried everything to convince her to change her mind. They wanted to force her to break up, but she refused. Roxana trusted her mother and sister completely because they knew her very well. They noticed a sudden change in her mood. Initially, she hoped that Edmundo would develop feelings for her, but as time went on, her hopes faded. By May 2008, she was fed up because she no longer wanted to be the object for him to satisfy his sexual desires. She threatened him that if he did not change, she would make their relationship public. She also planned to gather evidence of his mistreatment of other patients. She warned him that if the incident was exposed, his career would be over, as no one would want to see him for medical treatment anymore. Edmundo understood Roxana better than ever. He was aware that she had once participated in a popular television program, giving her a platform to share her story with the media. Additionally, the TV channel that aired the program was owned by someone who had previously clashed with he, making the fallout even more serious. It became clear to he that if she went public, it could lead to a nationwide scandal. On July 12, 2008, around 2 p.m., Roxana met with Mariana, a young man she had previously loved. In the Chacao area, he was supposed to help her write a script. The meeting took place at a shopping mall around 6 p.m. However, the meeting was interrupted when Edmundo kept calling to harass Roxana. She felt forced to cancel her date with Mariana, saying she needed to see her best friend. Irma, however, Mariana, who knew Roxana well, quickly realized she was actually going to see Edmundo. In fact, Mariana, Roxana and her sister were all close friends and knew about her relationship with Edmundo. He had told her many times that he did not approve of the relationship, but his words had no effect. She often had to come up with excuses to hide from her friends and family whenever she went on a date with Edmundo because she did not want to be criticized. Ultimately, Mariana had no choice but to put her in a taxi, knowing she was indeed heading to meet Edmundo. Earlier that evening, she had planned to meet Irma, but she eventually texts Irma to say she's going to meet someone Irma also knows. Referring to Edmundo, Irma understood immediately. When Irma called, she around 7:40 p.m., but only received a brief answer. After that call, no one heard from Roxana again. When the police began investigating the case, Edmundo tried to defend himself and gave interviews about Roxana's disappearance. During the interview, he confirmed that she had come to the clinic that day, but had only stayed for a few minutes. On July 21, 2008, Edmundo was called to the prosecutor's office to testify as a witness, but failed to appear. Consequently, the detectives assigned to the case searched his belongings, starting with his office at the La Florida clinic. There, they discovered a triangular earring, which matched the one found on Roxana's body. They also found blood stains in the office and collected samples for DNA analysis using luminol. Forensic experts found large blood stains on the sofa, which appeared to have been meticulously cleaned. Along with hair, DNA testing confirmed that both the blood and hair belonged to Roxana. At that time, Edmundo lived in a penthouse in the Cebucan neighborhood of Caracas. However, it wasn't long before the police arrived at his residence. What they discovered among his personal belongings shocked them. They found 1.2 photographs of women, some naked, others in their underwear. Most of these photos were taken at his clinic, and the women appear to be under the influence of psychotropic drugs. Among the photographs were also images of Roxana. This evidence implicated Edmundo in Roxana's death. Despite this, he denied all accusations from the start. On August 1, 2008, Edmundo was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of Roxana. During the initial hearing, the court ordered that he remain under house arrest while the investigation continued. He was also prohibited from leaving the country, and his medical license was suspended. However, despite these bans, he continued to quietly provide psychological counseling services at home for 2 years. Until the trial began, it was not until the trial that he was permanently stripped of his medical license. Edmundo's trial officially began on March 16, 2010. The prosecution presented its case based on evidence gathered during the investigation. According to them, on July 12, 2008, Edmundo asked Roxana to come to his office. Shortly after 7:00 p.m., she went to his clinic in La Florida, where he struck her repeatedly in the head with a blunt object. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered at least 7 skull fractures. Additionally, the amount of drugs in her system far exceeded the recommended therapeutic dose. It was also discovered that she had been taking antidepressants during the trial. The prosecution has established that Roxana, due to her psychological condition, was emotionally unstable and easily manipulated. Edmundo, being medically trained, was fully aware of this and exploited his expertise to manipulate and intimidate her. 15 women testified during the trial, all alleging that Edmundo had subjected them to abuse during sleep therapy sessions. The court verified their claims. Edmundo's defense team argued that Roxana's visit to his office that day was very brief, suggesting he had no involvement in her murder. They attempted to shift the blame to someone else, asserting that he had no connection to the crime. However, despite these efforts to distort the facts, the evidence presented to the court was overwhelming. In September 2010, the court sentenced Edmundo Chirinos to 20 years in prison to be served in the state of Miranda. At that time, the maximum sentence for similar cases was 30 years. While in prison, Edmundo underwent surgery in the intensive care unit. Afterward, it was claimed that he could neither speak nor walk and began using a wheelchair less than 2 years later. In March 2012, he was released from prison to serve the rest of his sentence at home. This news spread across various media outlets, and what drew attention was that, upon his release, he was speaking perfectly normally. This sparked public outrage. As many saw it as an injustice, it appeared that arrangements had been made to allow him to return home. It became evident that the surgery had not resulted in the severe complications that were initially reported, leading to speculation about the true reasons for his release. On August 24, 2013, Edmundo passed away at his home from natural causes. The story of Roxana and Edmundo remains etched in the minds of many Venezuelans and is considered one of the most shocking cases in the country's history. Hello again, true crime fans. we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tiffany Maher. Tiffany Maher was born on April 29, 1973, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Her father was a college professor, and her mother, a Harvard graduate, eventually became a housewife. They had high expectations for Tiffany. Her parents set a goal for her to earn a college degree, and they worked hard to support her. Tiffany had a high IQ, and her family created a nurturing environment focused on education. As a result, she entered university, fulfilling her parents' dream for her. Tiffany has a sociable and humorous personality. She is very intelligent and friendly. Tiffany is not interested in romantic relationships. She focuses on her studies, which she enjoys very much. She feels that she has the ability to achieve great things with her intelligence, so she has chosen to postpone looking for a life partner. Tiffany is 40 years old and lives in the small town of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Although intelligent and educated, she is still single and is looking for her soulmate. She has a deep affection for animals, so her friends gave her 2 cats. The cats have become an important part of Tiffany's life. She loves them dearly and treats them as if they were her own children. During this time, Tiffany served as an associate professor in the chemistry department at Northeastern State University. She was well known for her sociable and friendly nature, easily connecting with everyone. Her lectures were not only informative, but also engaging, featuring a mix of stories and jokes that kept students entertained. Her cheerful personality made her beloved by everyone in her circle. Outside of work, Tiffany enjoyed crocheting and going to karaoke with friends. She was comfortable being alone and dedicated herself to her work, becoming one of the university's leading specialists, which was greatly appreciated. Tiffany often expressed that her job brought her happiness and allowed her to grow in her field. While many of her peers were focused on starting families and having children, she concentrated on education and expanding her knowledge. The situation changed as she got older. She wanted to find a partner to help her through the tough times. To achieve this, she created a profile on a dating website, hoping to meet the person she had always secretly dreamed of. On May 31, 2013, Tiffany's best friend, Sarah, received an unexpected text message from a staff member at the university where Tiffany worked. Tiffany was scheduled to give a presentation that day, but she did not show up, which was unusual for such a responsible person. Regardless of the circumstances, she always arrived early and prepared thoroughly, so her absence was very worrying. When the head of the educational institution spoke with other teachers, it became clear that Tiffany had not appeared in the department for several days. This aroused suspicion and caused anxiety. Sarah was really worried about her friend. She tried to contact Tiffany, but couldn't get through. For days, Tiffany ignored both calls and texts. Sarah had a feeling that something was wrong, but she tried to push those worrying thoughts away. When Sarah arrived at Tiffany's house, she immediately noticed something unusual. There was a black stain, like soot, on one of the second-story windows. Tiffany's car was missing from the driveway, which was unusual because she always parked there when she came home. Sarah also noticed that a small window, which Tiffany usually left open for her cats to come and go freely, was closed. Curious, Sarah went to the window to look inside and was devastated to see Tiffany's cat lying motionless on the floor. The situation was becoming increasingly alarming. Sarah decided not to go in, stayed outside, and called the police. She called 911 and explained what she had discovered, asking them to check on Tiffany. When police arrived at the scene, they found the main door of the house unlocked, allowing them easy access inside. Inside, they witnessed a horrific scene. There were many small fires in the house that had gone out. In the bedroom, they discovered Tiffany's body lying on the bed. Surprisingly, other than her burned legs, There were no visible injuries on Tiffany's body, and there were no defensive wounds on her hands or anywhere else on her body. After investigating the crime scene, the police determined that the fire originated in the living room and bedroom on the first floor. An object was placed under the sofa, but it did not catch fire, so the fire went out. A similar incident occurred in the bedroom, where the bottom of the bed was burned. The police who arrived at the scene discovered that several items were missing from Tiffany's home, including a laptop, a cell phone, a TV, a karaoke machine, and a car. The police concluded that this was likely a robbery. In addition, there are concerns that Tiffany may have been sexually assaulted. Suspicious marks on her underwear raise suspicion. All of these details will be collected for testing. A citywide alert was issued to begin searching for Tiffany's car, a 2011 red Ford Fiesta. Forensic experts quickly collected evidence at the crime scene, while police interviewed neighbors and people close to Tiffany. Since there were no signs of forced entry, it is believed that Tiffany knew the attacker and let him into her home willingly. Police first spoke with Tiffany's mother, Maria. She reported that she last saw her daughter on May 26, just 5 days before Tiffany was found. Maria and some relatives had attended a basketball game that day and had a good time together. Tiffany had plans to attend a date that evening, but did not share any details about the date. Maria noted that Tiffany seemed calm, untroubled, and had not received any threats. After the autopsy was completed, the medical examiner provided new information. They concluded that Tiffany died of asphyxiation, possibly from the pillowcase found at the scene. The police needed more time to investigate, but they found no signs of strangulation. Forensic experts also ruled out the possibility of death from fire because there was no smoke in Tiffany's lungs, suggesting she died before the fire broke out. It appears the killer set the fire to destroy evidence of the crime. The medical examiner estimated that Tiffany had been killed on May 26, 5 days before Sarah reported the incident to the police. The information Tiffany's mother provided about Tiffany's meeting on the day of her death seemed important. It was essential to find out who Tiffany was meeting with. The police needed to identify Tiffany's contacts and her method of communication. Tiffany's mother suggested that they investigate her office at the university, where she often spent a lot of time. At first, the office seemed unremarkable. However, police found a working computer and discovered that Tiffany had a profile on a dating website. Her best friend confirmed that Tiffany had recently been considering dating and finding a partner. Tiffany was using a popular Canadian dating website at the time. Police contacted the site's administrators to gather information about Tiffany's dating activities and messages. Since the site was based in Canada, they had to submit a request and wait for a response. Police then received a tip that led them to Tiffany's car, which had been found abandoned in the parking lot of an apartment building where her parents lived. Her parents did not mention the presence of the car, which aroused suspicion. Police interviewed them again, but her parents were completely unaware that their daughter's car was in the parking lot. After questioning, it became clear that her parents had nothing to do with the incident. It appeared that the criminal had intentionally left the stolen car near her parents' home to throw the investigation off track. The car was confiscated and sent for examination. Forensic experts examined it to find any signs of a potential thief. They discovered fingerprints on the steering wheel and DNA samples that did not belong to the Tiffany. The Canadian dating site's management has finally responded. They revealed that in early May, Tiffany created a profile and contacted multiple men at once. However, she mainly corresponded with one person. Unfortunately, this person did not provide his real name or surname. His account was Fander1980. There were no photos or phone numbers associated with the account, which raised suspicion from the start. Sadly, the account was deactivated the same day her body was discovered. It is possible that this person was involved in the murder, but attempts to contact him have been unsuccessful. Police were able to access messages exchanged between Tiffany's account and a user named Fander1980. Their conversations lasted for a long time and did not contain any flirtatious behavior. Police reviewed Tiffany's phone records and discovered that she was frequently communicating with someone, although this person's name was not saved in her contacts. When they called the number, no one answered. However, after further analysis, they discovered that the phone number was registered to an account named Big Daddy on another website, which was the same person named Fander1980. The criminal was registered at an address in Talos, but when police arrived, they found only an abandoned commercial building. It was clear that the suspect had made efforts to conceal his identity. When the police accessed Big Daddy's account, they discovered it had been deactivated on May 2, just 2 days after the Tiffany's death. Remarkably, just 3 minutes later, he registered again under a new name. Given that several items were stolen from the Tiffany's home around the same time, the police decided to check local pawn shops. This means the thief's information may have been recorded by the pawn shop employees. The investigation included checking pawn shops in the city. It was discovered that a man named Joshua John Schneider had gone to one of those stores with Tiffany's items. Police eventually identified him as the prime suspect. 38-year-old Joshua was from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Joshua was a regular at the police station and had served time in prison for car theft and sex crimes. He was convicted of rape in 1999. Joshua often used dating websites to find lonely women to rape. While Joshua was living with his girlfriend and their 2-year-old daughter, police tried to contact him at his home address, but he was not there and could not be reached. Police spoke to Joshua's mother, who said she did not know where her son was. On July 27, 2013, the police received a tip about Joshua's whereabouts from an anonymous person. Police were then dispatched to arrest him. This led to a police chase. Joshua was in the car with Heather and child at the time. Police followed him until he reached a wooded area near Tulsa, where he abandoned the car and fled, leaving his family behind. Joshua was arrested 10 days later, and during the arrest, Tiffany's cell phone was discovered in his backpack. Despite this evidence, Joshua claimed that he knew nothing about Tiffany. However, police soon found Tiffany's laptop and other stolen items at Joshua's home, where he lived with girlfriend, Heather Black. This raised suspicions about Heather's involvement, leading to her arrest as well. The child was placed in the care of Child Protective Services, and Joshua's DNA was found on Tiffany's bedsheets and on the steering wheel of her car. This evidence linked him to the crime. The police found a text message from his mother on his phone. She had written it shortly after the police arrived at the house. She warned him that he should run away because the police were looking for him. She was then made an accomplice, as she had tried to cover up for the murderer. Joshua and his mother, Karen, were then taken to the police station. It was clear that she was trying to warn her son and help him avoid the police. It is also possible that she was involved in the crime, and those theories need to be investigated. At first, Karen claimed that she did not understand what was going on. However, when she realized that the police had strong evidence for an arrest, she became increasingly concerned. She eventually admitted that she had warned her son after the police arrived, but denied any involvement in any other wrongdoing. In July 2013, Joshua was arrested for murder, rape, robbery, and attempting to cover up the Tiffany investigation. His girlfriend, Heather, chose to cooperate with the police, and all charges against her were dropped. During the hearing, she confirmed that Joshua had confessed to Tiffany's murder and that he had tried to avoid the police, putting both her and her daughter in danger. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Joshua began to speak out. He claimed that his online relationship with Tiffany began as a simple flirtation, but they eventually decided to meet in person. On the day of their meeting, They had sex and then spent some time talking. When Joshua suddenly confessed that he was living with a girl and a child, Tiffany was furious. She then threatened to expose their relationship. This led to a fight. While trying to defend herself from Tiffany's attacks, he hit her, causing her to fall and become unconscious. There was also a fire, and he was not sure how it started. He claimed that when Joshua left the scene, Tiffany was dead. However, the prosecutor's office believed his entire story to be a lie and found it completely unbelievable. The prosecutor's office pieced together the facts of the case. On May 26, Tiffany attended a basketball game with her parents. That evening, she met Joshua at her home. When he arrived, Joshua overpowered her, attacked her, and then strangled her. He claimed that their encounter was consensual, but experts believe that was not the case. He decided to kill Tiffany and then steal her belongings. He then tried to burn the house down to destroy the evidence. However, he fled the scene before realizing that the arson had failed. It was clear that the fire was intentional. After leaving the crime scene, he stole Tiffany's car. He then used it to drive to Tiffany's parents' apartment complex. He left the car there to distract the investigation. Police discovered that some of the stolen items were sold by Joshua at pawn shops, while other items such as his phone and computer were left at his home, Joshua. The defense argued that Joshua had been abused by his father as a child, which had a negative impact on him. However, this claim is not convincing, given the horrific nature of the massacre. There is no way to justify such actions. Joshua was a danger to society and showed no remorse for his crimes. Throughout the trial, there was no sympathy for his. As a result, the jury found Joshua John Schneider guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Joshua was denied parole. He questioned the jury's ability to conduct a fair investigation and argued that Tiffany's death could have been an accident or manslaughter, since she had invited Joshua to her home. His attorney sought a retrial, believing that this would result in Joshua receiving a fair trial. The defense argued that Joshua's constitutional rights had been violated and that the investigation had been hasty in its conclusion. The defense argued that not all of the evidence from the investigation was presented to the jury. They pointed out that Joshua's girlfriend Heather was involved in the case. However, she was able to clear herself of any wrongdoing. Joshua is serving his sentence at the Davis Correctional Facility in Holdenville, Oklahoma. Despite this outcome, the lawyer continued to advocate for Joshua's case. He appealed to the jury's sympathy, highlighting that Joshua had a 2-year-old child who would be left without a parent. The defense maintained that Joshua was incapable of committing such a crime, arguing that he loved his son and did not want to return to prison and lose the chance to raise him. Once again, accusations were directed at Heather, but these efforts did not yield any changes in Joshua's sentence, which was ultimately upheld. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Christina Purcell. Christina Purcell, a 41-year-old veterinarian, worked at a clinic in the small town of Greer, South Carolina, which has a population of 35,000. Her colleagues all described her as an exceptional person. She was regarded as the best in her department and was highly experienced. She had a great sense of humor, which helped alleviate challenging situations at work. Her co-workers respected her, and management highly valued her talents. Christina had a young daughter, whom she co-parented with her ex-husband, John Mello, during the early years of her life. Friends and acquaintances all agreed that her daughter meant everything to her. After their daughter's birth, Christina and John separated but maintained joint custody. Then, she was engaged to a new partner named Bradley. Despite an apparently perfect life, but she was involved in a custody battle with her ex-husband, John, and the custody dispute between them was intense. On October 5, 2021, when their daughter visited her father, John, he flew her to Italy. This prompted Christina to file a complaint against him for violating custody, which further strained their relationship. Christina even launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for her legal expenses, and many people contributed. On October 13, 2021, Bradley, aged 65, tried calling Christina's in the morning. After she failed to answer, he went to her house. He knocked, and when there was no response, he entered through the back door. Inside, he discovered a horrifying scene. Her lifeless body was in the living room with rose petals scattered around. So, he immediately called 911, but it was too late to save her. Police discovered over 30 stab wounds on her body, mostly on her head, face, and neck. Although the scene was chaotic, it did not resemble a typical robbery. The police found unusual mystical objects in the house, hinting that someone unstable might have conducted a sacrificial ritual. This led investigators to consider the possibility of a ritual murder. Forensic experts determined that Christina was murdered elsewhere. Evidence of dragging was found throughout the house, and in some areas, the body was left behind and placed in various positions, possibly to take photographs of sexual acts. Later, the body was moved to the living room and covered with rose petals, with petals also strewn along the path where it was dragged. When information about the incident leaked to the press, they dubbed it the rose petal murder. At that moment, the police have not found any signs of forced entry into the house. However, Bradley, who alerted emergency services, had entered through the back door. He informed detectives that this door was always left unlocked, suggesting the intruder could have entered the same way. At the crime scene, detectives discovered clear signs of staging that complicated their investigation. They had to sort through numerous conflicting pieces of evidence to discard the irrelevant and find the right direction. Detectives have never encountered such complex and confusing murder cases before, making it difficult to determine which lead to pursue. They suspected that the murder was intentional. The perpetrator had specifically gone to Christina's house to commit it. And detectives must find out his motives and who he is. Inside the house, they found memory cards and the laptop in the living room near the body. A transparent handbag containing a powerful illegal drug was also discovered. There were small droplets of dried blood, and Christina's mobile phone lay nearby. In the hallway, a bag was found with 2 white envelopes, each containing $500 in cash. A suitcase held a firearm, a single-shot self-defense pistol, and numerous documents related to a court case involving Christina's daughter, prompting detectives to consider the possibility that her ex-husband, John Mello, was involved. Forensic experts used luminol to examine the entire house, enabling them to detect even the smallest traces of blood. They discovered hundreds of tiny blood spots in various places, highlighting the attack's brutality. Christina suffered a significant loss of blood and endured severe pain before dying. She was stabbed 31 times. The police scrutinized Christina's mobile phone for any leads. Initially, detectives focused on whether her partner, Bradley, who found her body, might be involved in the attack. To compare information, they also retrieved his mobile phone to analyze its contents. Police noticed peculiar behavior from he was highly agitated. His reaction didn't seem like that of a grieving fiancé. He was trembling, inconsistent in his statements, and wore gloves throughout his interactions with the investigators. This behavior only heightened the suspicion of law enforcement. Later, it became clear that their suspicions were justified. While investigating Christina and Bradley's devices, the police uncovered shocking details about Bradley's life, clarifying his nervous behavior. They had strong reasons to suspect that he was exploiting her daughter, Jane Doe, to create explicit content. In February and August, he recorded videos and took photographs of Jane nude in various inappropriate poses. These materials were found on the phone and laptop that were confiscated for examination. However, it is not clear whether this was done secretly or with her consent. Doubts emerged after the police discovered more disturbing information from Bradley's laptop that revealed unsettling aspects of the intimate relationship between Christina and he. The police uncovered increasingly disturbing information, including a new type of victim, animals. Numerous photographs were discovered showing individuals involved in sexual acts with animals, mainly dogs. Shockingly, Christina, one of the clinic's leading veterinarians, who occasionally took animals home for temporary care, was involved in these acts. According to state law, such sexual offenses can result in up to 5 years in prison, and the offender must pay a fine of at least $500, which may be increased at the court's discretion. Law enforcement described these recordings as some of the most repulsive materials they had ever encountered. The public was outraged upon learning that Christina, a seemingly kind woman from a veterinary clinic, was involved in such acts with her daughter and dogs. After discovering all this evidence, Bradley Post was arrested on October 19, 2021. He was charged with the sexual exploitation of a minor and the distribution of explicit materials. It emerged that he not only created photos and videos but also sold them. Additionally, the police considered the possibility of his involvement of Christina's death, but he firmly denied any involvement. Detectives found no evidence linking him to the murder. There was no trace of blood on his body or clothes. Furthermore, Christina had died several hours before he arrived at the house, leading the police to doubt his connection to the murder. Christina's ex-husband, John Mello, is also a suspect in the case. His main motive was gaining full custody of their daughter, which he did not want to share with Christina. This is a common motive for murder. However, at the time of the crime, John was in Italy with his daughter. This alibi was easy to verify since he hadn't returned to the country. Despite this, investigators kept John on their list of suspects, considering he might have orchestrated the crime indirectly. John returned to the country on October 21, 2021, a week after Christina's murder. Following his return, the police obtained a warrant for his detention. He sought help from his best friend, Zachary Hughes, who was 29 years old at the time. Zachary seemed suspicious to the police, so they looked deeper into his background. He was born and raised in Morro Bay, California. The turning point for him came in 2005 when his parents vacationed in Virginia. During this trip, they adopted 5 children from Russia. These children had suffered abuse in their previous foster families, resulting in physical and psychological trauma. The adoption aimed to teach Zachary and his brother Ellie about morality and to provide the adopted children with a safe, loving, and stable home. Zachary and Ellie struggled to communicate with their new siblings, leading to frequent family conflicts due to misunderstandings. Zachary's entire family worked on the farm, but he had a special talent: he studied music. His parents bought him a piano, and he became very skilled at playing it, which was especially noticeable in high school. He started participating in music competitions and won first place at the Southeastern Piano Festival. He has achieved great success, even performing a solo program with the South Carolina Philharmonic Orchestra. In 2010, he applied to the Juilliard School in New York, where Irina taught piano at an advanced level. Not only was Zachary accepted, but he was also offered several scholarships for his exceptional talent. Thanks to his exceptional talent, Zachary outperformed all his classmates and became the only student from the USA selected to participate in the International Music Festival in Kyoto. Only 11 people from around the world were chosen for this event. Those who know he say he is a loyal friend, highly moral and very good at communication. In his free time, he used his skills to help those in need, often performing for free at rehabilitation centers, nursing homes, and hospitals to bring joy to people. By 2018, Zachary enrolled in a master's program in piano performance at the university. At that time, he had a strong desire to help people globally. This led him to volunteer for the United States Marine Corps and apply to a military educational institution to become an officer within a year. He understood the intricacies of military service, but at the start of his second year, he suffered fractures in both legs. This injury forced him to halt his studies and receive the title of Hello. Around this time, a woman reached out to Zachary, seeking a talented pianist for a church in Greer, South Carolina. He accepted the offer and moved there to perform regularly. And he received half of the donations collected from churchgoers. Initially, this provided a good income, but by the mid-2020s, the pandemic significantly reduced the number of church attendees. As a result, he had to find new income sources. He began giving solo performances throughout the city and state and took on additional part-time jobs. Additionally, he started a blog offering valuable piano lessons. To support his performances, he acquired portable electrical equipment, which provided him with the necessary mobility. While living and working in South Carolina, Zachary met John, Christina's ex-husband and a former music producer. John supported Zachary by helping him with performances and offers him a part-time job. Between mid-2020 and 2021, when he assisted John with household chores, which deepened their friendship. He became John's closest friend. As a result, the police questioned him about his possible involvement in Christina's murder, wondering if John could have asked him to do such a thing. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed CCTV footage from a camera located near Christina's house. A camera installed in the peephole of the house opposite captured all the incident outside Christina's home on the day of her murder. The footage showed a stranger wearing dark clothing and a hooded jacket entering her house around 10 a.m. A few hours after, the stranger left on a bicycle, this time wearing a mask. Christina did not leave the house, and no one else visited, until the next day, when Bradley arrived and found her dead. This evidence cleared Bradley from the list of suspects in the murder case, although he remained in jail on other charges. Investigators suspected that a stranger in dark clothing, captured on camera, was the killer, but they couldn't identify him. His face was covered, and there were no distinguishing features on his body. They then requested footage from surveillance cameras along the bicycle paths to trace his movements and began reviewing the recordings. This process was lengthy but fruitful. The bicycle appeared in several videos, including one where the stranger in black was loading it into the back of his pickup truck. Although the grainy footage obscured the license plate, the model, make, and color of the truck matched Zachary's vehicle. It seemed he was involved in the brutal murder of Christina's. The police obtained a warrant to search Zachary's house. There, they found a bicycle identical to the one used by the attacker. They seized Zachary's computer for examination. Through this, they discovered active correspondence between John and Zachary, uncovering over 1,700 text messages, most of which were encrypted. The messages were clearly coded and contained hidden information. Additionally, some texts were jumbled. They probably did this to distract the police if the police suddenly contacted them. Detectives found the following clues in the messages. On April 17, 2021, 6 months before Christina's death, John asked to host a party for her. This message was not encrypted. On the day of the murder, John asked a friend how the musical performance went, and the friend replied that everything was great. Although it seemed like a harmless question, the police discovered there was no performance that day. They suspected that John used performance as a code word for the murder of Christina. All other information on Zachary's phone was either encrypted or deleted. He also used an access code unknown to the police, which complicated and delayed their investigation. Additionally, they couldn't obtain data on the device's location at the time of the attack on Christina. The phone was frequently switched to flight mode, including when the mysterious masked man came to Christina's house. It appears this was done on purpose to prevent Zachary from being tracked and to avoid involvement in the crime scene. Based on the evidence collected, officers obtained a warrant for Zachary's arrest. While they were preparing to file charges, Zachary was invited to perform on an international cruise. By the time the warrant was issued, he was already in Europe, so the detectives had to wait. Fortunately, when the charges were filed, Zachary had returned to Michigan, unaware that they were planning to arrest him. He could have easily left the country by crossing into Canada or taking another flight to a cruise ship. However, once he learned about the charges, he voluntarily returned to South Carolina and surrendered to the police, believing they were mistaken. On November 3, 2021, Zachary hired lawyers to defend his reputation, stating he was not guilty of any wrongdoing and intended to refute the slander tarnishing his name. However, he refused to allow the police access to his phone, prompting them to file a court petition. The court subsequently ordered full access to the mobile phone. Despite this, he repeatedly provided incorrect passwords, which delayed the investigation. Finally, by April 8, 2023, after approximately 700,000 attempts, the smartphone was unlocked. The police discovered crucial messages between John and he, discussing their encrypted plans to kill Christina. While these messages were intended to be used as trial evidence, they were considered circumstantial and insufficient to determine the trial's outcome. Zachary and John were known for their impeccable reputation, supported by many witnesses, and had no prior criminal history. The jury could not rely solely on correspondence and footage of a similar car to convict them. More new evidence emerged when a forensic examination uncovered the criminal's DNA under Christina's fingernails, which matched Zachary's DNA. Consequently, the police could confidently assert that he was the one who attacked and brutally killed Christina in her home. The defense argued that the CCTV footage did not clearly show the criminal's face or accurately identify the car involved. As a result, they labeled the evidence as circumstantial, as initially assumed. They emphasized that Zachary had no prior legal issues and was described by friends and acquaintances as a kind person incapable of committing a violent crime. Additionally, there was no apparent motive for him to attack Christina. And the lawyers rejected the DNA test results, claiming the samples were tampered with or contaminated. From the outset of the trial, once the public became aware that Zachary, the renowned musician, might face imprisonment, the court received numerous letters from dissatisfied people. These letters came from former classmates, teachers, Zachary's friends, and even people who didn't personally know him but admired his musical talent. Among the supporters were also numerous employers who praised his skills. Collectively, they vouched for his character, adamantly believing that someone as talented and kind-hearted could not be a murderer. In total, the court received over 50 such letters. The lawyers emphasized that Zachary had no previous legal issues. He had served in the U.S. Army, having volunteered and pursued education to become an officer rather than just serving as a private soldier. Additionally, Zachary could have avoided any legal troubles by simply accepting an invitation to return to work on a cruise liner. However, he chose to return to his home state and turn himself into the police as soon as he learned about the charges against him. He was fully aware of everything, including the warrants that the police were obtaining to investigate further. Despite this, he wasn't deterred because he believed he was innocent. The lawyers presented this as key evidence of his innocence. Zachary requested to be released on a $100,000 bail so he could be placed under house arrest with his parents until the trial, allowing him to stay in a calm environment where he could play his favorite instrument. He also agreed to have no contact with the families involved in the case. However, the court denied his bail request, leading to his transfer to prison. He remains there, awaiting trial set for 2024. He continues to deny any involvement in Christina's death. John also denies all charges. During a conversation with investigators, he explained that he fled to Italy with his daughter. He said he was exhausted from legal battles with his Christina and was horrified to discover that her fiancé, Bradley, had inappropriate intentions towards his 9-year-old daughter. Evidence suggested Christina was involved, as she appeared in some photos with her daughter. So John claims he took his daughter away to protect her from Christina, her unstable mother. He intended to challenge for custody using the explicit photos taken by Bradley and believed he had a strong case. If Christina lost custody, John would have no motive to harm her. Nevertheless, John repeatedly insisted he would fight for his daughter at any cost, despite he not commenting on his connection to Zachary. The prosecution believes Zachary is involved because his DNA was found under Christina's fingernails, indicating she resisted him. He may be either a co-conspirator or a victim of John's manipulation. The investigation into Christina Purcell's death has become intricate, full of unexpected developments and mysteries. Detectives persist in seeking justice for her, gradually assembling clues to identify the mastermind and uncover the case's dark secrets. Although the journey to bring justice to she may be long, but it will certainly not stop. The investigation team hopes that the case will soon be illuminated, allowing she to rest in peace. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jennifer and Nura Jackson. On the night of June 5, 2005, Jennifer Jackson, 39, was found dead at her home in Memphis, Tennessee, United States. The night before, June 4, Jennifer had attended a friend's wedding and returned home around 11:30 p.m. She lived in a house in a prestigious area of Memphis with her 18-year-old daughter, Nura. Their relationship was so close that they were more like best friends than mother and daughter. Jennifer had previously been married to Nazmi Hassan, a captain in the Lebanese army, and they had a daughter when she was 20. However, their marriage did not last and they divorced shortly after Nura was born. Nura remained with her mother and her father did not visit often due to his work that required frequent travel. As a result, Nura grew up without a father. Jennifer worked hard to provide for herself and her daughter, which strengthened her character. She achieved a lot, bought a house and a car, and made sure her daughter lacked nothing. When Nura turned 16, her father retired early and moved nearby. They became close during this time. Unfortunately, this close relationship did not last long. Just a year later, her father was murdered in his store. The crime scene provided no clues and the case remains unsolved. After this tragedy, Nura changed a lot. She started skipping school, going to parties frequently, rarely coming home, and relying solely on her mother for financial support. Nura's mother, Jennifer, felt frustrated and did not know how to help her daughter. Although she tried to guide Nura, nothing seemed to work. Friends advised Jennifer to wait out this challenging period, saying that such behavior was common among teenagers and that things would eventually improve. Trusting their advice, Jennifer chose to take a step back. However, tensions within the family remain high due to Nura's defiance until a new horrifying event occurs. At approximately 5 a.m. on June 5, 2005, neighbors heard a loud and persistent knocking on the door. They were still asleep, confused as to who could be visiting at such an early hour and worried that something was wrong. The neighbors lived across the street from Jennifer's house. When they opened the door, they found an 18-year-old girl named Nura screaming, saying that someone had broken into their house. The neighbor then took out a gun for protection and followed Nura to Jennifer's house. They entered through the back door. Nura entered first. She rushed to the phone and called 911. She told the police that someone had attacked her mother. While Nura was talking to 911, she gave the neighbor directions to Jennifer's bedroom. When the neighbor entered the room, he found Jennifer lying on the floor at the foot of the bed, covered in blood. She showed no signs of life, and there was a lot of blood in her mouth and on the bed. He hurried to the Jennifer to check her pulse, but she was already cold and there was no way to help her. Realizing she was dead, he went back to tell his wife while Noura was still on the phone with the police. Neighbors later returned to Jennifer's home to support a grieving Noura and keep her company. Paramedics arrived to confirm Jennifer's death, determining that she had been dead for several hours. Forensic experts began examining the crime scene, while police questioned Noura, who may have been the only witness to her mother's attack. Noura said that she came home from the party around 5 in the morning and found someone breaking into the house. Worried about her mother, she quickly ran to Jennifer's bedroom, where she found her unconscious. Noura then ran to a neighbor's house for help, saying that she didn't see anyone in the house. During the investigation of the crime scene, police observed a broken window on the inner door that connects the kitchen to the garage, with shards of glass scattered on the kitchen floor. It appeared that the window had been broken from inside the house rather than outside. All entrance doors were locked with no apparent signs of forced entry. Experts noted that it seemed Jennifer was attacked while sleeping in her bed, leaving her unable to defend herself. The situation appeared staged as a break-in, but there were inconsistencies. The hole in the window was positioned much higher than the door lock, making it impractical for an attacker to reach the door handle and open it. Upon further investigation, the police discovered a second hidden lock near the broken glass, which was easily accessible. This lock, equipped with a concealed hinge on the door frame, could not be seen from outside, indicating that the attacker was familiar with the house. On the kitchen floor, police found bloody boot prints and drops of blood. In the bedroom, blood covered the bed, and Jennifer's body was on the floor, suggesting she was attacked while in bed and then dragged to the floor. The attacker inflicted over 50 wounds on Jennifer's head. There was also a wicker basket present, reminiscent of other crime scenes where criminals cover the victim's face to prevent them from seeing the attacker. The situation seemed suspicious. On the surface, the house appeared affluent, much like the surrounding neighborhood where the victim lived, which could have attracted burglars. However, nothing was stolen. Valuables were clearly visible throughout the house. There was no sign of struggle, and the woman had not been sexually assaulted. So what was the motive? The brutal nature of the attack on Jennifer suggested a personal vendetta. Consequently, police began to investigate her life more closely to identify potential suspects. At the same time, the police searched the area around the house, interviewing neighbors and looking for surveillance cameras that might offer critical evidence. Unfortunately, at that hour, all the nearby residents were still asleep. No one witnessed the attacker or heard anything unusual. Additionally, there were no nearby surveillance cameras to provide any leads. Police learned from Noura that Jennifer had broken up with Mark Irwin shortly before her death. The motive for the murder appeared to be jealousy and resentment, leading police to focus on Mark and bring him in for questioning. During the interview, Mark expressed the pain of the breakup to him, saying that he loved Jennifer and would never hurt her. Mark said that he called Jennifer around midnight to discuss personal matters, hoping to mend their relationship, but she did not answer. Assuming she was asleep, he decided not to bother her and went to bed. Mark mentioned that he stayed at his house that night, which was quite a distance from Jennifer's house, at least an hour-and-a-half drive. Although he lacked a solid alibi, he seemed genuinely distressed and cooperated fully with the investigation, passing a polygraph test. Police also tracked his car and phone, confirming that he did not leave his local area that night. This evidence led to Mark being cleared as a suspect in the murder. Noura said that her mother's second husband, whom Jennifer divorced in 2001, was abusive. He had threatened Jennifer and had once pointed a gun at her mother. Noura suspected that he was involved in her mother's murder. Police investigated this lead but discovered that he had an alibi for the time of the murder. After interviewing Jennifer's relatives, police determined that she had no enemies. Instead, all the evidence pointed to Noura, who had been arguing with her mother recently. Noura may have staged the crime. She may have had a motive to kill her mother to inherit her mother's money. During the investigation, it became clear that Noura was a troubled teenager. She not only had a habit of attending parties but was also frequently smoking marijuana. Noura had a short temper, often displayed aggressive behavior, and would resort to using foul language. She demanded money and, when denied, would resort to physical aggression. Additionally, there was a conflict between Noura and her mother regarding the inheritance from her father. Noura wants to sell the property quickly for cash, while her mother wants to keep it. Police suspect Noura is involved in the crime and have summoned her for questioning. Noura repeated the story she had told earlier. She had attended a party and returned home around 5 in the morning to find her mother brutally murdered. She claimed she had nothing to do with the crime. However, the police soon realized that her story was not entirely accurate. After checking her bank card activity and surveillance camera footage from her car, they discovered that at 4 in the morning, she had stopped at a 24-hour store to buy a first aid kit. The kit was later found in her car, but Noura had not reported it. Forensic experts determined that her mother's time of death was between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. A review of Noura's phone records showed that she was at her mother's house at the time of the murder, with details that matched the timeline perfectly. In addition, Noura had a small cut on her left hand, which she could not explain. Experts believe the wound may have occurred while she was holding a knife to stab her mother. Noura said she did not tell police about the trip to the store because she did not think it was important. The police interviewed the friends who were with Noura at the party, and they stated that she left early, around midnight, and no one else saw her after that. They also mentioned that there was no beer at the event. Noura had claimed at the party that she had opened drinks and shared increasingly bizarre stories, including singing, spilling beer, getting minor injuries, rescuing a stuck cat, and burning herself while cooking. During the investigation, it was observed that Noura was wearing a warm, long-sleeved sweatshirt that nearly covered her hands, despite it being hot outside. She also had a band-aid on her hand and appeared to have wet hair, suggesting she had just showered. During the interrogation, police asked Noura why her hair was wet and why she was wearing a sweatshirt. Noura insisted she hadn't showered and that she often wore sweatshirts, even in warm weather. However, her friends disagreed, stating that she typically didn't dress that way. The police could not find the murder weapon or any bloody clothes that could link Noura to the crime at the time of the attack. They did discover drops of Jennifer's blood on the porch, indicating that the assailant had left the house with blood on them and had likely disposed of the knife elsewhere. As a result, the Noura Jackson was arrested and charged with Jennifer's murder. Bail was set at $500,000, which Noura could not afford, leaving her in prison awaiting trial, facing the possibility of life imprisonment. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Noura killed her mother due to constant conflicts over Noura's lifestyle, which included partying, skipping school, sex, and drug use. Jennifer refused to give Noura money, which angered her and prompted her to kill her mother to gain access to her assets. Witnesses spoke of a troubled relationship between the two. Jennifer's sister said that tensions had escalated a week before the murder, when Jennifer told Noura that she needed to change her lifestyle or leave the house. A friend who attended the party with Noura claimed that Noura expressed feelings of hatred toward her mother. A cousin shared that Noura asked about inheritance and life insurance, which raised suspicions. A neighbor reported that Noura had angrily demanded money from her mother just a week earlier. Additionally, evidence suggested that there was a dispute regarding the sale of her father's car. The prosecution argued that there had been a staged break-in and that phone records showed Noura was home at the time of the murder. The prosecution presented evidence that Noura had left the party early and spent about 3 hours at home before going to get a first aid kit. While Noura claimed she had been driving around town, phone records showed that she had actually been at home. She claimed that she had left her phone at home, but this was disproved when she called a friend from the store. The friend confirmed that Noura had called him at 1 a.m. on her home phone and hung up immediately. The prosecution argued that she hung up because she was afraid of being discovered after mistakenly calling from her home phone. The prosecutor pointed to inconsistencies in Noura's story, such as the sweatshirt and the cut on her hand. It was determined that she had gone to Walgreens at 4 a.m. to purchase a first aid kit for her cut, which included antiseptic and bandages. Surveillance footage from the store showed Noura asking for tissues at the counter to wipe away the blood, suggesting she had a fresh, bleeding wound. The prosecutor argued that Noura had worn the sweatshirt to cover her cut but was unsuccessful, as police had noticed the bandage on her hand. During the trial, a recording of Noura's 911 call was played. The prosecutor highlighted a peculiar moment. When asked if her mother had been shot, Noura confidently replied no, even though she was in a panic and likely couldn't tell the difference between a gunshot and a stab wound. A neighbor, whom Noura had contacted that morning, testified that he was surprised by how openly she discussed the incident. The neighbor, whom Noura had asked for help that morning, was clearly surprised to hear her talk about the situation. Noura entered her home first, seemingly unafraid, while the neighbor followed her with a gun, worried about a potential attack. This behavior aroused suspicion. The prosecutor alleged that Noura was under the influence of alcohol and illegal drugs and was motivated by a desire to make money to support her partying lifestyle. However, Noura barely spoke during the trial. Her attorney, who took the case pro bono, spoke for her most of the time. The defense argued that there was no direct evidence linking Noura to the crime. No murder weapon was found that contained her DNA or fingerprints, allowing her to be ruled out as a suspect. The lawyer accused the police of handling the investigation poorly. They found no evidence that would help identify the criminal. So the police chose to blame the troubled daughter to close the case. The lawyer argued that statistically, children rarely kill their parents, and this case differs from typical maternal murder cases. The attorney argued that the entire case was based on circumstantial evidence. Jennifer's bedroom did not contain Noura's DNA, and there was no Jennifer's blood on Noura's sweatshirt. The lawyer argued that if Noura had attacked her mother, she would have suffered much more injuries, but she only suffered one cut. The prosecutor denied this claim, saying that Jennifer did not defend herself. Instead, she was asleep at the time of the attack. Despite the defense's arguments against the investigation, the prosecutor's evidence convinced the jury, resulting in Noura Jackson being convicted of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 20 years and 9 months in prison. After nearly 10 years, the Tennessee Supreme Court granted Noura a new trial. It was revealed that a key witness, a friend of Noura's, came forward, claiming that she had called him to her house to resolve a problem. That night, the witness had also used drugs, which may have affected his judgment, and the prosecutor was charged with withholding this information during the trial. On August 22, 2014, the Supreme Court overturned Noura's conviction, stating that this testimony was crucial to the jury's decision and that they might have ruled differently if they had known the truth. Concerns were raised about the integrity of the prosecutor, Amy Wyrick, as it became evident she had engaged in similar misconduct in other cases by concealing important facts to secure convictions. The court reprimanded her for these actions. In response, Amy stated she was prepared to retry the case and demonstrate Noura's guilt. Noura's excitement about her new trial was significantly dampened. She had new lawyers who supported her and successfully moved her case to a neighboring district court to minimize publicity and avoid involvement from prosecutor Amy. Despite this, Noura was still very anxious about the possibility of facing trial again. Ultimately, she was offered a plea bargain for a lighter sentence, which she accepted. She used a legal option called an Alford plea, where she maintained her innocence but pleaded guilty because the prosecution had enough evidence to convict her. As a result, her sentence was reduced to 15 years, and she was released early for good behavior in 2016, having served a total of 11 years in prison. During her time in prison, she experienced a worsening of a medical condition that prevents her from having children, and her criminal record makes it impossible for her to adopt. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Deanna Laney. Deanna Laney was known for being quiet, uncommunicative, and calm. She lived in a small town with a population of just 600. She was deeply religious and a member of the Pentecostal church, where her relative was the pastor, and she participated in the choir. People who knew Deanna were shocked by her actions, as no one suspected she might have mental health issues. She always appeared to be a loving, exemplary mother and wife. However, outside of the church, the family lived quite isolated from society. They had no close neighbors, and their home was situated on a large plot of land, distant from other houses. They chose to raise their children in the countryside, homeschooling them instead of sending them to public schools. Deanna, a housewife, is responsible for her children's education. This isolation likely contributed to others not noticing any problems with the seemingly loving mother. Their family lived in isolation from the outside world, to the point that only a small group of family members knew the details of Deanna's mental health problems. On the evening before Mother's Day, May 10, 2003, a 911 call was made from Northeast Texas. A calm female voice clearly told the dispatcher that she had killed her children. The dispatcher kept talking to the caller and guided her to the emergency service location. When police officers arrived at the small house in Chapel Hill, they identified it as the home of Deanna and Dale Laney. Inside, they found Deanna in pajamas, seemingly just woken up, looking confused as the police continued their investigation. Officers continued to search the area and eventually found the woman who had called 911. She was nearby in a small grove, wandering barefoot, in white pajamas covered in blood, still talking to the emergency dispatcher. It was 39 years old Deanna Laney. She calmly informed the police that her son's bodies were behind the swings in the yard. The officers went to the spot she described and discovered the bodies of 6-year-old Luke and 8-year-old Joshua. Both boys were lying on the ground in their underwear, their heads so severely mutilated that they were unrecognizable. The children had suffered fatal head injuries. Experienced detectives said this was one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever encountered. However, there were only 2 bodies. Officers were told by Dale that they had 3 children. Despite this, they continued searching for the youngest child. They entered the house and checked the children's room, where they discovered 1-year-old Aaron. He was still alive but severely injured, covered in blood, and a pillow was over his face. Aaron was immediately taken to the nearest children's hospital and then moved to the Dallas Medical Center for treatment of the terrible injuries caused by his mother, Deanna. Deanna was arrested, but she was unable to give a statement due to mental health issues. She claimed that God commanded her to kill her sons. She used stones to attack the heads of the 2 children, Joshua and Luke. Although the youngest child, Aaron, was seriously hurt, but the boy survived the incident. Investigators questioned Dale, suspecting that he might have heard or seen something, as the children were likely to scream during the attack. However, he was bewildered and didn't understand how his wife could commit such acts. He mentioned waking up that night to the cries of Aaron, which was unusual since the child typically slept soundly. He went to the nursery and found his wife standing over the crib in the dark. She reassured him that everything was all right and that she was just soothing the baby. Trusting her, he went back to bed and slept throughout the incident. He only realized the true nature of his wife's actions when it was too late. Police were unable to learn of any problems Deanna was experiencing from Dale or her relatives. It was later discovered that she was hallucinating, which made her intend to kill her child, supposedly under God's influence. Among all the friends and family interviewed, only her sister, Pam, noticed changes in her behavior. Recently, Pam informed investigators that she started acting differently. During this time, she barely ate and lost noticeable weight. She spent all her free time reading the Bible and occasionally said strange things. However, Pam didn't think much of it. After discussing Deanna's behavior with Dale, she dismissed her concerns and felt reassured. The police observed Deanna's erratic behavior while she was in custody. Her condition visibly changed before their eyes. She would sometimes collapse to the floor in a fetal position and crying. Then she might stand up and start singing church hymns. At times, she seemed to realize what she had done, resulting in a vacant stare. It was clear that she was at a high risk of ending her own life, so the police followed protocol. Deanna was placed under special supervision to prevent self-harm. This was necessary to conduct a psychiatric evaluation, which later took place in a psychiatric clinic. The doctors questioned Deanna, and she smiled as she recounted her actions toward her sons. She laughed sincerely, believing she had fulfilled God's will. She was convinced her children would be resurrected, but she felt the youngest, Aaron, should have died too. She regretted that this did not happen, as she believed it meant she had failed to fully comply with God's demands. As punishment for her actions, she drank water from the toilet and licked it off the floor during her hospital stay. Deanna explained that she had resisted God's will for a long time. She did not want to kill her children, which she thought angered him. He increasingly insisted that she fulfill what was predestined. The longer she resisted, the more severe the punishments he demanded. Ultimately, she felt she had to surrender and follow his will. Deanna compared her actions to those of Andrea, who killed her 2 children 2 years earlier under similar religious delusions. According to Deanna, after the end of the world, Joshua and Luke would serve as witnesses at the Last Judgment, which is why she ended her own life. Deanna confided to doctors that she felt fighting those voices was a selfish act to save her child, even though it meant she was disobeying God. Ultimately, she believed she made correct decision by submitting to the Lord's will. Deanna recounted that on the night of May 9th, she was awakened by what she believed to be a message from God, telling her that the time had come. She quietly got out of bed to avoid waking her husband. First, she went to Aaron's room, where she had previously hidden a large stone intended for a ritual act. She used the stone to strike the baby on the head several times. The baby cried out, so she placed a pillow over his face to silence him. Her husband, Dale, half asleep, entered the room. She reassured him that everything was fine, so he left and went back to sleep. He was unaware of the situation and missed the chance to save his children. Deanna kept the pillow on Aaron's face until she heard a gurgling sound and then stopped. Next, Deanna woke her 2 older sons, Joshua and Luke, and took them to the backyard garden. She led Luke aside, instructed little boy to dig in the ground, and then began hitting him on the head with a large stone. She struck him at least 8 times, crushing his skull. Afterward, she dragged his body behind the swing and placed a large stone on his chest, believing this would prevent him from breathing. She then spoke to God, saying this was all she could do for her son. Then, lightning struck, which she interpreted as a sign that Luke had died. Afterward, Deanna went back to the garden and began hitting Joshua. However, he was bigger and stronger, so and resisted his mother more. She then pinned his arms down and struck his head with a stone until he stopped moving. After this, she dragged his body behind the swing. Immediately after the act, she called 911 and confessed to the horrific crime. Aaron also suffered severely. Though the baby survived, the injuries were so serious that he was left disabled. The child lost his sight and independence, needing a wheelchair for the rest of his life due to his mother's abuse. The case of Deanna had many similarities to Andreas. Both women lived in Texas and homeschooled their children. They were deeply religious and believed their actions were for religious purposes. Both felt that they had no other option but to harm their children. They each called 911 afterward, and both were evaluated by the same psychiatrists before their trials. Deanna was aware of Andrea's case and often compared herself to her, but Deanna's trial unfolded very differently. Deanna appeared in court in late March 2004. The prosecution sought to punish her for 2 first-degree murders and aggravated assault on Aaron, requesting the death penalty, which is applicable in Texas. Alternatively, she faced 3 life sentences for her crimes. The defense lawyers argued that she was innocent due to insanity. They claimed that insanity was the only reason a religious mother, who loved and homeschooled her children, would kill 2 of them and harm another without showing any emotion. In Texas, at the time of the murder, the state had some of the strictest laws in the United States regarding the handling of murderers. Defendants had to prove they had a mental disorder during the crime and convince the court they couldn't distinguish right from wrong. 5 psychiatrists formed a team to evaluate Deanna's. The examination lasted 6 days, during which she cried almost continuously. She refused to look at photographs of her mutilated children and the crime scene. Some psychiatrists believed she was sane when she killed her sons, while others thought she couldn't distinguish good from evil due to religious hallucinations. Deanna shared with doctors several details that even those close to the Laney family, including household members and relatives, did not know. The doctors concluded that signs of mental disturbances began appearing more than 3 years ago. An early indication, similar to hallucinations, was Deanna smelling sulfur, which she believed came from her children and perceived as a demonic sign. Deanna also reported seeing Aaron playing with a spear. She claimed that God had shown her 3 methods for her to kill her son, using a spear or a knife, a stone, and strangulation. While doing chores in the garden before the massacre, Deanna tripped over a stone. She realized that the stone would become the main weapon she would use to sacrifice her sons. She didn't tell anyone about this, but openly claimed that the Lord had spoken to her. She shared this in church, warning parishioners about the impending end of the world. However, the congregation largely ignored her, as such statements were common in their religious tradition, which not everyone followed. During her initial psychiatric evaluation, Deanna showed no emotion and genuinely believed her children would be resurrected. After taking antipsychotic medication, she eventually understood her actions differently and felt remorse. Deanna was horrified to realize she had been suffering from hallucinations that drove her actions. During a psychiatric examination, it was determined that Deanna was insane when she committed the murders of her 2 sons, Joshua and Luke. The examiners concluded that she suffered from psychotic delusions that prevented her from distinguishing right from wrong at the time of the murder. However, the prosecutor disagreed with the diagnosis that Deanna was insane when she committed the murders. He argued that even if she believed she was doing God's will, she should have known that her actions were wrong according to state law. The prosecutor pointed out that her first action after the murder was to call 911, which indicated that she was aware of the wrongness of her actions. Additionally, when Dale entered the room, she attempted to hide what had happened, further suggesting that she knew her actions were wrong. The prosecution also stressed that when Deanna was unable to complete killing Aaron, she told God that he just needed to do the rest. This statement demonstrated to the prosecutor that she was aware of right and wrong. The prosecutor believed that her actions were intentional and planned, which is not consistent with the behavior of someone who is insane. Prison guards testified at the trial, describing Deanna's behavior in prison as unusually compliant. They rarely saw such conduct and believed she had serious mental health issues. The 911 call recording was part of the evidence the jurors considered. Her voice on the call was eerily calm. Her voice on the call was eerily calm. Jurors also requested a psychiatric report to understand why she stopped attacking Aaron, who was 14 months old at the time. However, they reached a verdict before receiving the report. Dina sat near the portrait of her 3 children and cried loudly as the prosecutor recounted the horrifying incident of how she used a rock to hit her children. Her sons, Joshua and Luke, were struck on the head so severely that their brains were exposed, leaving their heads in a bloody state. Deanna's husband, Dale Laney, 47, attended the trial and was devastated by the loss of his 2 sons. He couldn't comprehend how this tragedy occurred and believed it was appropriate to commit Dina to lifelong treatment in a clinic. In the end, Dina was declared innocent due to insanity and had to be treated for mental illness at the hospital. Doctors expected her to need lifelong treatment and doubted her recovery. Dale divorced Dina after she was admitted to the psychiatric clinic in 2008. He eventually remarried and started a new family. He continues to care for his disabled son, Aaron. Deanna was closely monitored by psychiatrists for 8 years. In 2012, doctors determined that she no longer needed to stay in the hospital because she was healthy and did not pose a threat to herself or others. She was released on a number of conditions. She was to have no contact with minors. She needs court permission if she wants to change her address. Had to allow social workers to visit her at any time, and had to continue taking her prescribed medications and undergo drug and substance testing. Only a few people, including her lawyers, know where Deanna lives now. Her ex-husband, Dale, felt very angry when he learned that she was released from the psychiatric clinic. Many people in society also agree with Dale. They believe the killer of 2 sons should be imprisoned or face the death penalty. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Reagan Hancock. On the morning of October 9, 2020, Reagan's mother went to visit her pregnant daughter and discovered her body lying on the floor. Reagan, then 22 years old, had been brutally beaten and stabbed to death. Her unborn child had been removed from her womb and kidnapped. Born on November 14, 1998, in Howe, Arkansas, Reagan was part of a large Christian family that included a younger sister and several half-siblings. Reagan also had a 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, from a previous relationship. Unfortunately, Kinley's father had passed away. She had recently remarried to Homer Hancock and the couple had just moved into a new home. Reagan and her husband were eagerly preparing for the birth of their child, due November 10, 2020. They had purchased all the necessary supplies and her parents had chosen the name for their child, Braxton Sage. Reagan and Homer worked hard to support their family. Despite swelling in her feet, Reagan continued to work at a fast food restaurant. She had plans to attend college, but postponed it due to her first pregnancy. Her husband Homer worked in the freight industry. On October 9, 2020, at 8:30 a.m., Homer started receiving unusual messages from her. Reagan expressed that she wanted to be happy, but things weren't going well. Homer was confused and worried about what was happening. He replied to her messages, told her he loved her, and tried to call, but she didn't answer. At 9:30 a.m., a neighbor texted Homer and said their puppy was outside. The neighbor came to their house and found the garage door open, which was strange since no one was home. Worried, Homer tried to contact Reagan again but got no response. He called everyone he could think of, but no one had any information. Finally, he called Reagan's mother and asked her to check on Reagan. Since he was away from home, he took the day off from work and rushed back. Reagan's mother arrived at the house at 10:15 a.m. and found a horrifying scene. It was her worst nightmare, and she immediately called the police. When Homer arrived, officers were already at the scene and wouldn't let him enter. The officers were stunned by what they saw. Blood covered the floors, walls, ceiling, and furniture. Reagan was found lying face down, severely beaten with multiple defensive wounds on her arms, showing that she had fought back. It was clear that her death was extremely cruel. Concerned for the baby she was carrying, Reagan's mother asked the police to check. When they turned Reagan over, they discovered a large cut in her abdomen, and the baby was missing. Police believed the attacker primarily targeted the baby. Reagan's 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, was safe and hiding in another room during the incident. Forensic scientists quickly arrived to investigate the crime scene. Around 10 a.m., police pulled over a car for speeding. Taylor Renee Parker was driving with a newborn baby on her lap, and the umbilical cord had not been cut. The other end of the cord was tucked into her pants. She stated that she had just given birth while driving and that her baby was not breathing and needed urgent help. The police found it strange that there was no blood on the seat. They called for an ambulance and began performing artificial respiration on the baby. An ambulance arrived and took Taylor and the baby to the hospital, but hours later, the baby was dead. Doctors began examining Taylor, but she resisted. During the examination, they discovered that she was not bleeding. A hormone blood test showed that she was not pregnant. The baby was small and premature, born at 35 weeks. Taylor initially said that she was pregnant with the baby. She staged the scene with the umbilical cord to make the police believe that the baby was hers. The police later discovered that the baby was not hers. They returned to the hospital and arrested Taylor. Taylor, a 27-year-old friend of Reagan, was excited when Reagan announced her second pregnancy on social media. Later, Reagan reached out to Taylor, who was also expecting, and they formed a friendship. The two girls lived close to each other. Taylor resided in the nearby town of Sims, Texas, about 15 kilometers from Reagan's home in New Boston. They frequently communicated online and occasionally met for walks. They had much in common, both preparing for childbirth, shopping for baby items, attending prenatal classes, and sharing their experiences. Taylor's relationships have been complicated. She has a daughter and a son from 2 previous marriages, both of whom live with their fathers and are already in school. Taylor lost custody of them and has had very little contact since then. Taylor formed a close bond with Reagan, even filming their wedding, but during this time, she was misleading both Reagan and her fiancé, Wade Griffin. At the start of her relationship with Wade, she lied about being an heiress to a multi-million-dollar fortune, claiming her family were oil tycoons. Later, she told him she had ties to the Mexican mafia and needed his protection, asserting that her presence caused a major shootout involving the FBI, which she insisted must remain secret from the media. Wade believed her and became involved in expanding his farming business at her urging, which led him to buy more pigs and cows. He took out a loan for these purchases, thinking he would repay it with the inheritance Taylor promised him. However, he never received any money and ended up in a tough financial situation. Later, Taylor became obsessed with the idea of buying a large hunting property valued at nearly $5 million, even though she didn't have the funds. She spoke to a realtor, claiming to be the heiress of a multi-million-dollar fortune from syrup producers, despite having previously said her family was involved in the oil industry. They reached an agreement to buy a plot of land for $3.5 million, making an initial deposit of $200,000 that Taylor borrowed from Wade. At that moment, Taylor felt proud and shared the exciting news with her family, giving everyone postcards featuring a photo of the property and saying they could go hunting there. However, the deal ultimately fell through, because she could not afford to pay the remaining amount. Initially, Taylor claimed that the syrup company would pay $7 million, but that money never arrived. At that time, Taylor was intensely motivated to purchase her dream home, which cost $20 million, a sum she didn't have. She falsely claimed that a wealthy uncle could provide the money, but then she vanished again. Concerned, the realtor attempted to contact both Taylor and Wade, unaware of the ongoing deception. Taylor eventually presented the realtor with documents claiming she had inherited $370 million, but these documents were fake. As a result of her lies, her relationship with Wade was on the brink of collapse. Feeling that she might lose Wade, Taylor decided to have a child to strengthen their bond, but she faced challenges getting pregnant due to her hysterectomy. Thus, she devised a scheme for a fake pregnancy. In February 2020, she told Wade they were expecting a baby in July. Taylor shared an ultrasound photo on social media, but it was actually an image of her other daughter. There are some people who know the whole story about Taylor and know that she cannot conceive. They discussed this in a conversation and are confused about why she would fake her pregnancy, believing it to be a tactic to keep her husband. However, they do not know her true intentions. Additionally, Taylor's family knows that she cannot conceive and suspects that she fabricated this pregnancy to keep Wade with her. They believe this is a hoax on her part. Recognizing her behavior, her relatives suspected that Taylor's false pregnancy would soon result in a miscarriage, and that would be the end of it. However, they never imagined she would go to the lengths of committing murder to obtain a child. While pretending to be pregnant, Taylor continued to seek approval from Wade's family, who were not fond of her. Knowing that Wade's mother had a crush on a Nissan Altima Platinum, Taylor bought one for her, much to her delight. Unfortunately, Taylor later claimed that the car had been repossessed by the dealership. Wade and his mother were hopeful for its return, but that never happened. Wade then contacted the dealership to inquire about the new car, only to learn that it had not been recalled. Rather, it had been sent back to the showroom because they hadn't paid for it. This revelation shocked Wade, but he chose to remain silent because he did not want Taylor to be stressed during her pregnancy. Taylor attempted to persuade her friends and family that she was pregnant. She shared ultrasound images and test results, claiming that her pregnancy was a blessing from God. Before the pregnancy, Taylor had told Wade and his family that her mother had committed to end his own life, likely to gain sympathy. However, everyone was shocked when Taylor's mother appeared at the Christmas party, as they believed she was dead. In mid-September 2020, just a couple of weeks before the due date, Taylor's ex-husband contacted Wade and claimed that she couldn't have children and was lying to him. Taylor then showed ultrasound pictures from a previous pregnancy and provided fake test results. She reassured Wade that her ex was trying to ruin her life and their happiness. Taylor promised Wade that she would soon give birth, proving that her pregnancy was real and that she wasn't lying. As October began, Wade asked about the baby's condition. She replied that the baby would come when the time was right. Meanwhile, Wade's mother expressed doubts about Taylor's pregnancy, insisting that Taylor was cheating on him. This caused Wade to distance himself from his mother because she did not trust him. Early on the morning of October 9th, Taylor felt it was time to act. She stopped at Walmart to shop, then grabbed breakfast at McDonald's while watching a video about a 35-week cesarean, which was the stage her friend Reagan was in. Taylor texted Reagan at 7 a.m., saying she was coming to visit. Taylor had made friends with several pregnant women online. She developed a sense of trust with them and eventually decided that Reagan would be the easiest target to kill. Reagan was the kindest and most trusting of the group, making her an ideal victim. Taylor was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and the murder of a child. However, she denied having planned the crime. Taylor claimed that when she visited Reagan, Reagan attacked her, and she used a knife in self-defense. Why didn't Taylor have any injuries after such an intense fight? She couldn't explain it, but she did share how the child ended up in her care. According to Taylor, Reagan was so injured that she felt the baby was dying inside her. Reagan begged Taylor to help, asking her to deliver the baby and take it to the hospital to save its life. Taylor was reluctant at first, but Reagan pleaded with her. At Reagan's insistence, Taylor attempted to save the baby. Taylor happened to have a scalpel and used it to cut into Reagan's abdomen to remove the baby and take the baby to the hospital. However, if this was the case, why did Taylor lie to the police who pulled her over, claiming that she had given birth? Taylor also later mentioned that Reagan's daughter, Kinley, left the room because of the screaming while Taylor was in surgery, and the girl testified to everything. This incident resulted in psychological trauma for Kinley. Additionally, Reagan's phone was never found. It seems Taylor turned off the phone and threw it away. When questioned, Wade said that he was not allowed to touch Taylor's stomach and not allowed to sleep with her to protect the baby, and that he believed her without question. Police believed Wade's story and he did not face any criminal charges. Taylor was transferred from Oklahoma to a prison in Texas, and her trial began in September 2022. Attorneys attempted to dismiss the kidnapping charges, arguing that the baby was not yet full term, but the judge rejected their arguments. The defense did not present any witnesses. Not even Taylor's mother or relatives were willing to testify on her behalf. During the trial, Taylor's ex-husband provided testimony. He said that Taylor constantly simulated seizures and health problems to arouse his pity. When he decided to end their relationship, Taylor suggested they have a child, even though she was unable to conceive again. She proposed using a surrogate mother, funded by her wealthy relatives, but he turned her down. After their divorce, a hurt Taylor spoke negatively about he to her friends, alleging that they had still planned for a surrogate mother together, but claimed that he had cheated on her with the surrogate, which made it impossible for her to forgive him. While her lawyers claimed she was insane, a psychiatric evaluation confirmed that although she had mental health issues, she was sane. In prison, Taylor exhibited aggressive behavior. Police discovered a map of the prison in her cell, indicating she was planning an escape because she was facing the death penalty. During her final hearing, her defense attorneys argued that Taylor was trapped in a desperate situation due to her fake pregnancy. Everyone, including her mother, knew the pregnancy was wrong, but no one offered to help her, which led her to take drastic action. Taylor had planned the murders for a long time and specifically targeted pregnant women she met online. She eventually chose Reagan as her victim. Reagan's mother described Taylor as a vicious person and called for the death penalty for her daughter's brutal murder. During the attack, Reagan fought desperately for her life and that of her child. She almost lost a finger in defending herself. Because she was pregnant, Reagan was especially vulnerable and unable to fight back. She suffered over 100 wounds to her body, including 39 to the head. The prosecutor concluded his argument by once again showing haunting crime scene photos. The prosecutor argued that Taylor deserved the death penalty for his horrific crimes. Throughout the trial, Taylor remained emotionless, showing no remorse even during the trial. On November 11, 2022, the jury deliberated for only 1 hour before finding Taylor Renee Parker guilty and sentencing her to death. Following the trial, the community came together to support the Reagan family, organizing a fundraiser for Homer and her 3-year-old daughter, Kinley. They also raised funds by selling T-shirts. Homer has been raising Kinley as his own since the tragedy and only returned to the house once after Reagan's murder to collect some belongings before moving out with her. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sandra Gallas. Sandra was born on May 15, 1978 in Japan. Her background was a mix of half Japanese, a quarter Hawaiian, and a quarter Portuguese. Sandra had an older brother, Lawrence, who always looked out for her. After Larry retired early from the military, her parents, Larry and Tashi, decided to move to Hawaii. Turns out, Hawaii is Larry's hometown. They settled on the island of Kauai, fulfilling their long-held dream of living in Hawaii. They instantly fell in love with the stunning island and found the locals to be extremely kind and welcoming. By the age of 4, Sandra was practicing gymnastics, and by 5, she was learning the traditional Hawaiian hula dance. She studied very well and became a very beautiful girl. Sociable, cheerful, and active, she made many friends. After graduating from high school, Sandra attended New York University to study journalism. Although she dreamed of becoming a journalist, her life took a different path. As someone from an island, she found New York City overwhelming, with its towering, makes her feel suffocated. She didn't enjoy living there and visited her parents in Hawaii, missing them greatly. After graduating, Sandra returned to Hawaii, where she met Darren Gallas, who was working as a builder at the time. Darren was captivated by Sandra's beauty, and they began dating in 1999. With her parents' blessing, they got married, and Sandra took his last name. They bought their own house on the island of Kauai. They appeared to be a happy, loving family. Sandra and Darren had 2 sons. A year after their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Austin. 2 years later, their youngest son, Braden, was born. Sandra took care of the children and managed the household. She and Darren love their sons very much and always try to do the best for them. However, their relationship gradually deteriorated. In 2005, Sandra discovers Darren has been having affairs with 2 married women. She found their phone numbers among his belongings. After she called them, they confessed to having affairs with Darren. She decided to end the marriage and filed for divorce. She could not bear his infidelity any longer. In June 2005, Darren moved out of the family home, while Sandra and their children remained there. Sandra changes her hairstyle to enter a new phase of life. Sandra started working as a waitress at a restaurant on the island to support herself and her children. Her goal was to become financially independent and no longer rely on Darren. Sandra's kind, polite, and friendly nature made her a favorite among the restaurant's guests and staff. It was there that she met Ryan Shinjo, a chef. He was calm, polite, and courteous, the exact opposite of Darren. As they spent more time together, a romance blossomed. Sandra felt comfortable and at ease with him, something she hadn't had in a long time. Ryan made her happy, and their relationship grew deeper and deeper. On weekends, they would often take trips to Honolulu. And Ryan would shower her with gifts. Sandra's parents were overjoyed to see their daughter happy again after a difficult divorce. Sandra and Ryan had plans to move in together, but unfortunately, those plans were not meant to be. Soon, tragedy struck. On January 25, 2006, 27-year-old Sandra was brutally murdered. That morning, before going to work, Ryan visited her. But when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. This was unusual, because they had agreed that he would stop by to visit her before going to work. He began checking the area around the house to understand what was going on and found that the garage door was closed and the lights were still on, meaning someone must be inside. He thought it was Sandra and that she simply hadn't heard the knocking at the door. Ryan looked out the garage window, and he saw a strange sight inside. Inside the car, Sandra was half lying down and unresponsive. Concerned that she might be suffocating from exhaust fumes, he screamed and called her name. But she did not answer. Panicked, he rushed to a neighbor's house, about half a kilometer away, for help. Together, they managed to open the garage door. Upon entering, he touched Sandra. He found her body was already cold. Immediately, he called 911 to report that Sandra was not showing any signs of life. Sandra, 27, was pronounced dead by paramedics. Police began examining her body, which was found inside the car. She was partially lying down, with her lower body in the driver's seat and her upper body thrown back onto the front passenger seat. It was clear that Sandra had been dead for some time and had been attacked. Her body showed signs of beating and had lacerations on his neck, indicating that she had been murdered. Forensic experts searched the crime scene for evidence, but found none. There were no CCTV cameras or witnesses in the area. Police suspected that Sandra had been trying to escape from someone, as it appeared she had been in a hurry to leave. She had been getting ready quickly, got into the car, but didn't have time to drive away. Instead, she was attacked, knocked down, and strangled. Investigators found no signs of robbery in the house. Valuables were still in their places, and there was no sign of disarray. Sandra was not raped, so what could have been the motive for the murder? Meanwhile, Sandra's parents were visiting their son in Texas and never imagined that something like this would happen to their daughter. In the morning, Sandra's boss called her because she hadn't shown up to work. This worried them, as Sandra was always known to be hardworking and responsible. When her parents tried calling her, she didn't answer. By evening, they received the devastating news about their daughter's murder and rushed back home. The brutal killing shocked everyone on the island. The locals were scared and worried that a serial killer might be on the loose on the island, posing a threat to them. People asked the police to explain, but the authorities reassured the people. They believed it was a crime with a personal motive, meaning it was intentional and targeted. Hawaii generally has a very low crime rate compared to the national average, except for certain disadvantaged areas on the island of Oahu. Detectives were committed to solving the case quickly to reassure the island's residents. Investigators believe the brutal nature of the death suggests a personal motive, so they considered ex-husband and current lovers as suspects. Ryan, the current lover, discovered Sandra's body. Darren, her ex-husband, had a strained relationship with her, and their divorce was nearing finalization. Darren is very sad about their divorce, and he became enraged upon learning about her affair with Ryan. Additionally, Darren and she was embroiled in a heated custody battle, which caused constant conflict. As a result, investigators questioned both suspects, Darren and Ryan, at the scene. First, they interrogated Darren. He stated that the day before the incident, he had picked up the children according to the court-ordered schedule. He took them to kindergarten in the morning, painted his mother's room while they were away, and then picked them up, spending a pleasant time with them. Darren claimed that when Sandra was supposed to pick up the children in the afternoon after work, but instead, the police came to him with bad news about her death. Darren claimed he was not involved in Sandra's death. Even though they are divorced, they still maintain a peaceful relationship and keep in touch for the sake of their children. Initially, he spoke confidently, but his actions showed the opposite. In the middle of the interrogation, he became nervous, confused his statements, and raised the police's suspicions. He could not provide verifiable alibis. At the time of the tragic incident, their children were too young to give statements, being only 3 and 5 years old. According to Darren, he was home alone at the time. But he failed the polygraph test. Turns out, he never called Sandra to check why did she come home late, which was unusual, leading investigators to suspect him of Sandra's murder. A search warrant for his home has been issued. The police discovered that a room remained unpainted, contradicting his claims. This suggested he might have had the opportunity to go to Sandra and kill her. After thoroughly inspecting the house, investigators found nothing relevant to the case. Despite their suspicions, the detective had to let Darren go home. They interviewed people close to he and Sandra, including her parents, all suspected him of having something to do with her death. He was known to be extremely jealous and controlling. He did not want to leave her and opposed the divorce until the last minute. Sandra had no enemies. Her family and relatives believe that Darren is the only person who could be her killer. Sandra's new lover, Ryan, provided an alibi. Although he failed a polygraph test, he was removed from the list of suspects. An autopsy revealed that Sandra died from strangulation, with characteristic marks on her neck and hemorrhages in her eyes. Her body also showed multiple injuries, indicating a painful death. Detectives were convinced that Darren was directly involved in her death, but they lacked the evidence to prove it. 2 years later, Sandra's undershirt was re-examined. During this detailed investigation, DNA was found and sent for analysis. The results revealed that Darren's DNA was present on her undershirt. This led authorities to consider charging him with murder, as it was considered vital evidence. However, the prosecutor decided against pursuing charges due to insufficient evidence. Before the murder, they were in regular contact and saw each other, especially when he came to pick up the children. Therefore, it is possible that his DNA accidentally got on her clothes without being related to the murder. The children, Austin and Braden, lived with their father, Darren. He had been granted full custody. The loss of their mother, Sandra, at such a young age was a significant shock for them. Austin and Braden's maternal grandparents have requested custody of the 2 children, citing Darren's aggressive behavior and his endangerment of the children. They believed he was responsible for Sandra's death and accused him of alienating the children from their grandparents. Despite these accusations, the court awarded full custody to Darren. He later married his new girlfriend, Kyron, and moved on with his life. As time passed, the investigation made no progress. Sandra's parents maintained regular contact with investigators, determined to seek justice for their daughter. From the moment he learned of Sandra's murder, her father vowed to continue to find the culprit so that he could be punished by the law. Thanks to the persistence of Sandra's parents and their close cooperation with the police, the case was eventually solved. The family offered a $20,000 reward to anyone providing information leading to the arrest and conviction of their daughter's killer, but still no one spoke up. It was not until 2012 that a team of investigators was assigned to look into the case. They reviewed all the materials with a fresh perspective and discovered some other details. In the documents, they found letters from Sandra to the attorney handling her divorce. These letters showed that her relationship with Darren was very strained. The letters revealed that she was afraid of his aggressive behavior. He had threatened her, was unhappy about her new relationship, and had harassed her. The most important evidence is the sign that Darren is a fussy person. Sandra mentioned that he was so meticulous and organized in everything he did, to the point that he wrote down in his diary every time she was upset about something, no matter how minor. This information intrigued the police, causing them to return to Darren's house to find and examine the diary. When they found out, they were shocked because he had kept detailed notes of every complaint about Sandra. He recorded every day of their life. For instance, he noted when she was 5 minutes late for a meet or bought the wrong kind of bread. However, there were no entries on the day before the murder, which puzzled the police because they knew he and Sandra had met, making it hard to believe that such a picky person would have no complaints to record. Sandra did not pick up the children on the day she died. Why didn't Darren note this in his diary or try to contact her? Perhaps he already knew she was dead and wouldn't be coming. Darren said he did not remember clearly what happened that day, which is why there is no diary entry for that day, even though he recalls other details clearly. His behavior seemed odd and unbelievable. Researchers speculated that he killed Sandra because he didn't want a divorce. In October 2012, Darren was charged with second-degree murder, with bail set at $1 million. He managed to post bail, allowing him to stay home during the trial preparation. Darren maintained his innocence. His lawyer pointed out that there was no evidence against him except DNA on the clothes, which might have ended up there for legitimate reasons, as he often picked up the children. All other evidence was circumstantial. Despite disagreements with Sandra, but they had reached an agreement on the division of property and shared custody. Therefore, the defense argued Darren had no motive to kill her. Additionally, Darren's attorney asked investigators to turn their attention to Ryan Shinju, who was romantically involved with Sandra at the time of her death. Ryan had a criminal history related to burying illegal substances. However, he denied all accusations against him, citing an alibi for the time of Sandra's death. He also cooperated fully with the investigation. He attributed his past criminal record to youthful mistakes and emphasized that he has not committed any offenses since then and has shown no inclination toward violence. Sandra's relatives and friends, called as witnesses for the prosecution, supported Ryan's statements. They described him as a kind person who Sandra felt very comfortable around. None of them believed Ryan could commit murder, especially since he had no motive. However, they had a different opinion about Darren. Darren was a cruel and domineering. He was someone Sandra feared. She avoided seeing him to avoid angering him. By court order, Sandra was forced to give Darren the opportunity to communicate with the children, even though she did not want to. Ryan added that he and Sandra planned to move in together for her protection against Darren. He suspects Darren is the person behind the crime, although there is no direct evidence. During the trial, Darren was portrayed poorly and was likely to be convicted. On his lawyer's advice, Darren accepted a plea bargain from the prosecution to reduce his sentence. This decision disappointed Sandra's family, but the prosecutor argued that a plea deal was the better option because without enough evidence, Darren could be acquitted. The prosecutor estimated a 50% chance of conviction, so Sandra's family agreed to the plea deal. In May 2018, 12 years after Sandra's murder, Darren pleaded guilty to first-degree assault on his wife, causing serious bodily harm. He did not provide any details about the crime. He was sentenced to imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of his sentence. In March 2022, his minimum term was reduced by 6 months. He may be eligible for parole in 8 years, with the earliest release date being May 2, 2026, and the latest May 1, 2028. He is currently serving his sentence in prison. Sandra's parents are still upset by the sentence, considering it unfair that Darren received only 8 to 10 years for a brutal murder. They believe he acted in a calculated, planning everything meticulously. He allegedly cleaned the crime scene thoroughly, wore gloves, and hid all evidence. He also provided a false, claiming he was painting walls, which was later proven untrue. Now that Sandra's parents are over 80, they live a peaceful and steady life. Her father had several heart attacks due to severe stress after losing his daughter. His biggest wish was to see Darren put in jail. Their son, Lawrence, often visits them from Texas. Sandra's parents hope Darren will one day feel remorse for his actions. Sandra lived a respectable life. Her children are now adults, living independently, no contact with maternal family, so little is known about them. Sandra's parents think Darren is the one who turned her children against her and her maternal family. During the trial, Sandra's children, then adults, sided with Darren and his parents. They do not believe that their father killed their mother. They attended all the hearings and, after Darren was convicted, cut ties with their mother's family. They believe that their mother's family put their father in prison. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Martin McNeil. Michelle Marie Summers, a well-beauty queen and part-time model from California. She had always cherished two things, her family and God. At 21, she met Martin, a 22-year-old man, at an event for Mormon singles. Michelle believed he was the man of her dreams, but her parents did not agree with that. They disapproved of his bold, abrasive personality and felt uneasy around him, wishing that their beloved daughter would not date him. Like Romeo and Juliet, her parents' disapproval only made Michelle find her relationship with Martin more attractive. While her parents saw Martin as a narcissist, she believed he was an ambitious man who had overcome a difficult childhood. When he threatened to end his life if she left him, she agreed to marry him. Then, they eloped and secretly wed in 1978. Their honeymoon was short-lived. Within 6 months of their marriage, Martin was sent to prison, leaving Michelle to spend most of her time alone. Before meeting her, he had forged checks totaling $35,000. In addition to typical items like jewelry and clothing, he bought a grandfather clock, 60 pairs of socks, a refrigerator, and strangest of all, he bought enough chocolate-covered cherries to last a year. He got the idea for check forgery from a TV program about check fraud, which claimed it could be done in 60 minutes. Martin thought he could do it even faster. Sadly, forging checks was just one of Martin's many lies. He almost completely made up the story of his life. He had ambitious plans for his future, despite a difficult childhood. While many young men pick up the guitar to join rock bands and impress women, he chose a different route. He aimed to gain wealth and recognition by becoming a doctor. However, his poor academic record posed an obstacle to his dreams. Undeterred, Martin applied his usual tactic, which was to lie. He first used a fake certificate to enroll in a medical college in Mexico. After studying there for 6 months, he forged more certificates and was accepted into a medical university in California. His plan worked, and in 1984, he officially became a doctor. By that time, he had also taken note of the many attractive women among his patients. Later, when Martin realized the respect people had for lawyers, he decided he wanted a law degree as well. Once again, he pursued this goal dishonestly. While working at the Brigham Young University Clinic, he falsified his application to gain admission to the university's law school. He has been a chiropractor for many years, but if his fake qualifications are exposed, he would have faced severe criminal charges. In 1990, he was caught committing fraud and was banned from writing medical bills for 12 years. In 1998, Martin was expelled from the medical center following allegations of sexual harassment, inappropriate behavior, and incompetence as a doctor. However, this did not deter him. In 2000, the governor of Utah appointed he as the chief physician at the Utah State Development Center. On the surface, he appeared composed and normal, but a closer look revealed otherwise. For example, he frequently threatened to end his life. However, whenever someone criticized his actions, he used this threat. In 1994, after being discovered having an affair with one of his patients, Martin threatened to end his own life. In 2000, after his wife, Michelle, discovered he was watching pornography, he threatened to kill her with a meat cleaver. His 14-year-old son had to intervene and take the knife away. 5 years later, he was caught again watching explicit films and once again threatened to end his life. It was also revealed that Martin had multiple relationships with women across the country. 2 of these women, Anna Osborne and Gypsy Willis, were more than just casual lovers. Anna owned a laser appeal clinic and met Martin in 2005 while he was working as a consultant. At the time, Anna was facing a difficult divorce, and Martin offered to act as a mediator between her and her husband. The reason is that he has specialized training in the field of lawyers. After that, Martin and Anna's relationship quickly became intimate. In conversations, he often bragged that with just the right combination of drugs, he could kill people easily, making death look natural, like a heart attack. He even suggested to Anna that she should kill her husband, but she initially thought that he was only joking. As for Gypsy Willis, she is Martin's true love. They met online in November 2005. Martin presented himself as a doctor and lawyer, he impressing she with his intelligence and charm. At the time, Gypsy was a 29-years-old nursing student. He gradually realized that without she, his life would not be perfect. Until then, he thought he had successfully balanced his double life, keeping his affair hidden from both sides. But he was mistaken. In February 2007, Michelle grew suspicious. She noticed Martin behaving oddly and decided to check his phone records. She repeatedly saw Gypsy's name and number. So she confronted him about the affair. He admitted to it and promised to end the relationship with Gypsy on one condition: Michelle had to work on herself, specifically her appearance. He asked her to have a facelift. At first, she was hesitant. She felt she needed to prepare for the surgery, as she had high blood pressure and wanted to address that first. However, he reassured her that everything would be fine. Reluctantly, she agreed, hoping the facelift might improve their marriage. Then, they met the surgeon, who would perform the surgery. Just moments before Michelle was put under anesthesia, Martin pulled the doctor aside and handed him a detailed list of medications to prescribe. He assured the doctor that he would personally oversee Michelle's recovery. Trusting Martin's medical expertise, the surgeon agreed without any hesitation. The operation was a success, and the doctor prescribed the medications as Martin had requested. However, these medications were dangerous when combined. The doctor assuming Martin would manage them properly, so he has no reason to worry. On April 3, 2007, Martin brought Michelle home from the hospital. She was heavily sedated, her eye was bandaged, and Martin took care of her. Their eldest daughter, 22-years-old Alexis McNeil, was studying to become a doctor, following in her father's footsteps. On April 10, 2007, she returned home for the holidays and to care for her mother, Michelle, who was recovering from surgery. She immediately noticed that her mother looked unwell and wanted to help. But Martin refused to let her. He asked Alexis to leave the bedroom, insisting that he would take care of Michelle himself. The next morning, Alexis found her mother in a state of exhaustion, lethargic like a zombie. She confronted her father, Martin, and he admitted he might have given Michelle too many pills. He explained that Michelle had vomited, so he gave her additional doses. Shocked that her father, a doctor, was mishandling her mother's medication, she insisted on taking over the responsibility of administering the pills. In private, Michelle confided in Alexis, asking to touch each pill before taking it. With her vision obscured by bandages, she relied on the unique markings on the pills to identify them. Michelle revealed she didn't trust Martin, believing he was up to something sinister. She even pulled Alexis close and said that if anything happened to her, Martin will be the one to take responsibility. Michelle recovered quickly, allowing Alexis to rest and continue her studies in medical school. The last time she spoke to Michelle on the phone was at 8:45 a.m. on April 11, 2007. When Alexis asked Michelle how she felt about Martin, Michelle responded happily, saying he was sweet and loving. She reassured Alexis there was nothing to worry about. However, Alexis unable to shake a sense of foreboding that something was wrong. During the morning of April 11, 2007, Martin left for work as usual. He then picked up his youngest daughter, Ada, from school at around 11:35 a.m. When they got home, he told Ada to go find her mother, Michelle, while he started preparing dinner in the kitchen. Little girl ran through the house calling out for her mom, but received no response. Eventually, she checked their bedroom, but her mother wasn't there. Thinking her mom might be taking a bath, little girl headed to the bathroom. She stumbled upon a horrifying scene that would haunt her forever. She found her mother, fully clothed, lying face down in the bathtub. The water had turned a reddish-brown color. Shocked and terrified, she screamed and called for her father, Martin. When he arrived, he told Ada to go get help from a neighbor, while he worked to get Michelle out of the tub. Then, Martin made a series of calls to 911. Some calls were abruptly disconnected, while in others, he claimed to be a doctor performing CPR on his wife, only to hang up again. These unusual behaviors prompted the 911 dispatcher to keep recordings. Shortly after the discovery of Michelle's body, Martin's son Damien and Damien's girlfriend, Eileen, arrived at the house. Martin speculated that Michelle might have overdosed on medication and passed out in the tub. However, instead of checking the medication himself, he insisted that Eileen flush the pills down the toilet and dispose of the packaging. The medical examiner concluded that Michelle had died from a heart attack, and police reports classified her death as unnatural. On the afternoon of April 11, 2007, Alexis received a strange message from her father, Martin. He mentioned that Michelle wasn't getting out of bed and asked Alexis to call her. When Alexis tried, Martin answered and said that Michelle was now in the bathroom, not breathing, and that he had called an ambulance. He then hung up abruptly, without waiting for her reaction. Alexis, one of the last people to learn about her mother's passing, hurried to Utah. She was deeply saddened by her mother's sudden passing, and she suspected that her father might be responsible. Her first reaction was to check how much medicine her mother had left, as she knew how many pills her mother had taken and how many should remain. However, Damien's girlfriend, Eileen, had thrown the pills away before she could check. The medical examiner concluded that Michelle had died from a heart attack, and police reports classified her death as unnatural. However, Alexis suspects that her father, Martin, is responsible for her mother's death. She confided everything to her older sister, Rachel, but no one wanted to believe that their father could harm their mother. Martin enjoyed taking risks and pushing boundaries. However, when he told his daughters to go to church and pray for God to send them a new nanny to care for the younger children, he crossed a line. Their mother had been buried only 3 days earlier, but the daughters obeyed their father and went to meet the nanny. The woman introduced herself, and Martin acted as though he was meeting her for the first time. In truth, he knew her very well. She was his mistress, Gypsy. She introduced herself as Jillian, but Alexis immediately recognized her as Gypsy Willis. Alexis warned her father, Martin, not to bring Gypsy into their home, but he ignored her. Less than a month after Michelle's funeral, Gypsy moved in with he. She didn't behave like a nanny at all. She didn't care for the children, clean, cook, or do any household tasks. Instead, she spent every night in Martin's bed. Rachel and Alexis questioned their father, Martin, demanding to know why this so-called nanny wasn't doing her job. However, he threatened to kick them out of the house if they didn't treat Gypsy well. With the help of their aunt, Michelle's sister, Rachel and Alexis cooperated with the police to investigate their mother's death. Meanwhile, Martin was scheming again. Gypsy is in debt, and Martin came up with a plan to solve it. He told her that creditors wouldn't be able to find her if she changed her identity, and he found a way to make it happen. Martin adopted a 16-year-old girl named Giselle, then sent her back to her biological family in Ukraine so Gypsy could steal her name and social security number. Then, he told Giselle that he would adopt her in the summer, but she never heard from him again. When Martin returned to Utah, he found a new home for his 3 other adopted daughters. A year later, Giselle's cousin, Gil, visited to check on her well-being. Upon arriving, Gil discovered that Giselle was living in extreme poverty with her biological family. Meanwhile, in the United States, Gypsy was living a comfortable life under Giselle's identity. Martin even altered his will, leaving everything to Gypsy. At times, he referred to Gypsy as his wife, while at other times, he claimed she was his daughter. When Gil brought the real Giselle back from Ukraine, Martin and Gypsy's fraudulent scheme involving fake documents was immediately exposed. In 2009, both pleaded guilty to federal charges and served time in separate prisons. While he was incarcerated, Rachel and Alexis tried to produce evidence of his involvement in the death of their mother, Michelle. the chief medical examiner agreed to review Michelle's toxicology report. Although each drug in her body is not toxic when taken individually, their combination can lead to death. The examiner also concluded that Michelle could not have taken the drugs on her own. As Rachel and Alexis investigated further, they uncovered the extent of Martin's lies. They discovered that his entire career was built on forged credentials. Adding to the scandal, Martin was still collecting disability payments from a brief stint in the military. Martin completed his prison sentence for fraud, forgery, and identity theft in July 2012. Perhaps he had plans to change himself, maybe become an astronaut, a nuclear physicist, or whatever his imagination could come up with. But he never got the chance. In August 2012, he was officially charged with the murder of Michelle. Tragically, Damien, one of Michelle's children, wasn't there to support Rachel and Alexis during this time. A few years after Michelle's death ended his life. Rachel and Alexis testified against their father, Martin, thereby exposing all of his lies and fraud. It also came to light that he had begun sexually assaulting Alexis just 6 weeks after Michelle's murder. He was convicted of this assault in a separate trial. Years after Michelle's death, her family finally uncovered the truth they had been seeking. Martin had drugged Michelle with substances that were nearly undetectable, then left for work to establish his alibi. In 2013, Martin McNeil was found guilty of murder and sentenced. As for Gypsy, she was only charged with identity theft and has maintained a low profile since the trial. Michelle and Martin's daughters are determined to completely eliminate their father's negative influence and figure from their lives. Alexis got married and adopted her 3 younger sisters. She also changed her last name from McNeil to Summers, her mother's maiden name. Alexis explained that she didn't want to be Dr. McNeil. She wanted nothing to do with her father. Hi everyone. Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Ashley Scott. Ashley, born on November 4, 1978, in Bossier City, Louisiana, is a kind-hearted individual. Her parents divorced while she was still in her mother's womb. However, her mother, Donna, later married Jimmy, who adopted she and loved her greatly. Jimmy had a biological daughter named Kia from a previous relationship. Unfortunately, Jimmy and Donna's marriage ended in divorce a few years later, primarily because Donna chose to leave. Ashley decided to stay with her father, Donna, but she continued to maintain a relationship with her mother. Even though Ashley's parents are divorced, she enjoyed a happy childhood. She was known for her kindness and obedience, and those around her recognized her beauty and potential. In 1996, she graduated from high school and went on to attend UAA Baptist University in Arkansas. There, she met her first love, Jeffrey Scott, who had also enrolled at the same university. Jeffrey was captivated by her beauty and warm smile, and soon they began dating. They are a beautiful couple, often holding hands and enjoying time together. Ashley's friends admired her and believed she had found a wonderful partner, as she often shared stories about how sweet and kind Jeffrey was and how fortunate she felt to be with him. In 2000, Ashley received the college degree she had always dreamed of. She pursued her dream of becoming a teacher and dedicated her life to education. However, her wedding to Jeffrey on June 9, 2001, was marred by some hidden problems. Although it appeared to be a joyous occasion on the surface, but some disturbing aspects of Jeffrey were apparent to everyone, and Ashley knew about them but chose to ignore them. A year prior to the wedding, Ashley had written to her sister, stating that she could no longer maintain communication with the family and requested they respect her choice. As a result, her family was not invited to the wedding. Ashley's friends were surprised to see that most of the guests were from Jeffrey's family, even though Ashley's family is very close and large. Initially puzzled, they later understood the situation. Her family disapproved of Jeffrey, and he made no effort to win them over. Underneath his friendly exterior, he often speaks ill of her family and acts inappropriately. Jeffrey offended those close to Ashley and believed he had every right to do so. What was most surprising was Ashley's reaction. It seemed like she was making excuses for his behavior. At the wedding, Jeffrey insulted some of her friends again and acted arrogantly. After they moved to Cordova, a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, Ashley's relationships with many people began to deteriorate. The darker side of Jeffrey started to show. After the move, he began working as a computer systems technician at his father's company, while Ashley became an English teacher at a middle school. Everyone praised her. She was seen as beautiful, cheerful, intelligent, and sociable. She loved her job and her students. Paul Dealey, a colleague, later described her as an experienced teacher. He mentioned in court that she was the main reason he looked forward to going to English class each day. He admits that school was the only place she felt safe and loved. It was where she could escape from Jeffrey. As time went on, the relationship between Ashley and Jeffrey worsened, and her connection with her family nearly fell apart. She refused to discuss it, claiming it was her personal choice. These were certainly influenced by her husband Jeffrey, who was a master manipulator. In the early years of their marriage, he completely controlled her and isolated her. His constant criticism, even on trivial matters, hurt her self-esteem. He tried to control she in every way possible. During this time, she only communicated with a few people, including her childhood friend, Lori. They had been friends since 5th grade and remained in touch into adulthood. In September 2006, Ashley attended a school reunion that she was excited about. While the others at the event didn't notice anything unusual about her, Lori was worried throughout the evening. Jeffrey kept calling Ashley, making it impossible for her to relax and enjoy the class reunion. He questioned her about who she was talking to, what she was wearing, what she was eating and drinking, and what conversations she was having. Essentially, he tried to control every aspect of her life. That night, Ashley confided in Lori about the nightmare she was experiencing and expressed that she couldn't continue living like this. She revealed that she was thinking about divorce and had even reached out to an attorney. Ashley also admitted that she knew about Jeffrey's affairs, including an affair with a colleague named Blair Brown, someone she used to be very close to. Over time, she had forgiven Blair, who had contacted her to reveal Jeffrey's true nature and how dangerous he could be. This class reunion became the last social event Ashley attended. After that, she was isolated for several weeks, and new bruises began to appear on her body. On November 23, 2006, at 3:46 p.m., a call was made to emergency services in Memphis, Tennessee. When 911 dispatcher answered, they were surprised by the calmness of the caller, Jeffrey Scott. He reported that his wife had passed out at 11:00 a.m., but a voice in the background said she might be dead. The dispatcher asked for clarification, and he stated that his wife had been breathing moments before, but now appeared to be dead. What was remarkable about the call was that Jeffrey did not appear distressed, his voice remaining calm throughout the conversation. Recognizing the possibility of a crime, the dispatcher immediately alerted the leadership, and police were dispatched to the scene. Within minutes of receiving a call, police arrived at the given address. Upon arrival, they were greeted by their host, Jeffrey. He then showed them to his wife's bedroom, Ashley. Inside, they found a man, Robert McGee, a friend of Jeffrey's, was performing CPR on Ashley. Dr. Robert informed the police that she was still alive, but her health condition was critical, with her pulse and blood pressure being very low. Upon closer inspection, medical responders found evidence of severe trauma. Ashley had suffered a head injury, likely caused by a blunt object. Her condition was dire. Her pupils were dilated and unresponsive to light. She also had bleeding from her mouth and nose, and many bruises. Scratches appeared all over her body, especially on her legs, chest, and back. The medical team attempted emergency resuscitation. They inserted a breathing tube, used a defibrillator, and administered medication to stimulate her heart. Unfortunately, all of these methods failed. Jeffrey was in critical condition and close to death. She was eventually taken to the hospital, and a neurosurgeon was called in to assess her condition. The neurosurgeon's assessment confirmed the medical team's initial diagnosis. Ashley's brain was no longer functioning due to severe damage. Doctors therefore decided to stop treatment to end her pain and disconnected her life support. She passed away shortly after. There was no doubt that Ashley had been brutally murdered. Her right ear was green, a sign often seen in people who were repeatedly hit in the same spot. A man's shoe print on her back suggested that someone had stamped or even jumped on her. Furthermore, her body showed multiple bruises at different stages of healing, indicating that she had suffered repeated abuse. Meanwhile, police were questioning two individuals, Dr. Robert and Jeffrey. Robert cooperated with the investigation, sharing what information he knew about the incident. He revealed that he had received a call from his friend Jeffrey at 2:30 p.m. He and Jeffrey had been friends since college and kept in touch occasionally. Jeffrey explained to he that Jeffrey and his wife had been drinking the night before, and afterward, she hadn't been feeling well. When she didn't wake up the next day, Jeffrey sought his help, although busy at the time, but he went to their house where he found Jeffrey next to Ashley, who showed no signs of life. Robert suspected that Jeffrey and Ashley had an argument and that something unfortunate had happened, which they wanted to keep quiet. That was why they contacted him. He was aware that they was facing difficulties and each reacted differently. Ashley had turned to alcohol as a means of relieving stress, while Jeffrey became angry and often lost control, hitting Ashley. When Robert examined Ashley, he realized that the situation was much more serious than he had initially thought. Unfortunately, Ashley had little chance of survival and required urgent medical attention immediately. So, he urged Jeffrey to call 911. Meanwhile, Robert analyzed the situation and thought that something much more serious had happened. He suspected that a crime had been planned. When speaking to the police, he admitted that he had deliberately kept Jeffrey at the scene to prevent him from escaping. Jeffrey remained completely emotionless throughout the entire ordeal. He appeared unconcerned about the fate of Ashley, the woman he once loved. When questioned by the police about what had happened, he explained that the previous night had ended in an argument. The reason for the fight was his discovery of the messages exchanged between his wife, Ashley, and another man, which led him to believe she was having an affair. Feeling betrayed, he admitted that he had beaten his wife once. Following the altercation, Ashley stumbled and fell due to her intoxication. According to Jeffrey, she faced severe alcoholism and often acted irrationally. He lost patience with her frequent tantrums. In a fit of anger, he asked her to leave the house. It was not uncommon for Ashley to sleep in the garage on such nights. The next morning, he found her still asleep in the garage and, feeling a pang of sympathy, carried her back into the house and laid her down on their bed. However, as the day went on, Ashley still hadn't woken up. Jeffrey realized something was wrong and attempted to revive her himself. He then called a friend named Robert, who was a doctor, to come to the house. However, the police did not believe his account. When they arrived, Ashley was covered in bruises from head to toe and had severe injuries to her face and head. Even if she had been drunk and fallen, she wouldn't have sustained such extensive injuries. It was evident that she had been assaulted. Jeffrey was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, and once the autopsy results were released, the charge was elevated to first-degree murder. The pathologist's report revealed that Ashley died from a subdural hematoma on the right side of her brain. Such injuries occur from a significant blow to the head, causing the brain to collide with the skull, which leads to severe bleeding and swelling that cuts off the oxygen supply. This process causes parts of the body to weaken, causing extreme pain. Tragically, she could have survived if help had arrived within the first few hours. Additionally, over 50 hematomas of varying colors and densities were found on her body, confirming that she had been repeatedly attacked. It's difficult to fathom the pain she experienced. The saddest thing is that the person who caused this pain was her husband, Jeffrey, the person who was supposed to protect her. After Jeffrey's arrest, detectives examined the crime scene and found signs of a struggle throughout the house. Items were scattered, furniture was turned over, and a broken vase was in the living room. On the kitchen table, near a laptop, are printed text messages between Ashley and her lover. These text messages support Jeffrey's testimony about the cause of the crime. In the garage, officers discovered bloodstains on the floor. Inside her car, they found women's clothing and personal items, including a handbag with her documents and passport. It seemed that she had been planning to escape, but did not succeed. Officers then interviewed family members and friends, uncovering unexpected details about their lives and the circumstances surrounding the incident. Unfortunately, Ashley is having a difficult time in her relationship with her husband, Jeffrey. From the very beginning, they believed that their relationship would turn out well. However, he quickly became abusive, making her life extremely miserable. Lori's testimony became very important to the investigation. Detectives were interested in what Ashley's family and friends had to say. Through their conversations, they gathered a lot of useful information. Lori also shared that just before Ashley's death, Jeffrey had called her multiple times to complain about his wife. He claimed that Ashley drank heavily, lost her balance, and frequently fell, which explained the bruises on her body. However, the next morning, Ashley would not remember these incidents and would blame Jeffrey instead. He believed that Ashley's increasing alcohol dependency was due to their mutual friend Blair, whom he accused of corrupting Ashley and turning her against him. Jeffrey also expressed that he no longer wanted children because he felt disgusted by Ashley after everything that had happened. He accused his wife of being unfaithful, lying, and struggling with alcoholism. However, Lori did not believe him and thought he was trying to excuse his own behavior. Eventually, Lori realized that Ashley was a victim of domestic violence and was in serious danger. After each of Jeffrey's calls, Lori would try to reach Ashley, but she never answered, which was unusual. The last time they met was shortly before the tragic incident. They went shopping together, but Ashley did not buy anything for herself and seemed sad and lost in thought. Lori attempted to discuss Ashley's marriage, but Ashley preferred not to ruin their time together and changed the subject. She just said she was ready for a divorce, but it made her very nervous. She knew Jeffrey very well and worried that she couldn't predict how he would react. The next testimony concerns Blair Brown, who is often mentioned when talking about Ashley's family. During her questioning, she admitted that she had been in a romantic relationship with Jeffrey in the past, which gave her insight into his uncontrollable fits of rage. It was noted that Blair and Ashley had rekindled their friendship about 6 months before the crime occurred. Blair felt sympathy for Ashley and offered her occasional support. She acknowledged that her relationship with Jeffrey was a mistake and apologized repeatedly for it. She and Ashley sometimes meet for drinks. Ashley often goes to her house to hide from Jeffrey. On one occasion, he found Ashley at her place and violently attacked Ashley's, hitting several times in the face and throwing Ashley's onto the street, showing no concern for she as a witness. Even though there have been such incidents, Ashley still justifies Jeffrey's actions. The trial of Jeffrey Scott started on January 13, 2009. The prosecution claimed that the crime was premeditated. Evidence showed that an argument between Jeffrey and his wife Ashley began in the living room, where a broken vase was discovered. The conflict becomes more serious as they move throughout the house, and Ashley endures violence in nearly every room. Bloodstains were found throughout the home. Ashley's divorce attorney testified for the prosecution, stating that she had met with Ashley the day before death. At that time, all the divorce paperwork was ready. Ashley only needed to pack her belongings and leave while Jeffrey was at work. The attorney advised Ashley to leave secretly, which explains the items and documents found in her car. However, Ashley chose not to follow this advice because she wanted to explain her decision to her husband, a choice that ultimately proved fatal. The attorney did everything she could to assist Ashley, even offering her services for a minimal fee. She said that Ashley had been drinking and quitting work to deal with her emotions related to her marriage. This shows that Ashley needs long-term support. To ensure Ashley's safety, they communicated in secret, as Jeffrey controlled all phone calls. They met in public places or used payphones for their conversations. Witnesses reported seeing scratches and bruises on Ashley, which she tried to hide with makeup. Some people knew the source of her injuries, but felt powerless to intervene. In their final report, medical examiners noted that Ashley had been frequently kicked. It appeared that Jeffrey had pushed her to the ground and stomped on her, leaving old bruises on her back and legs. The defense team for Jeffrey worked hard to have the charge reduced to a second-degree crime. The attorney tried to make Ashley look bad, portraying her as an alcoholic and emotionally unstable. Their strategy was to convince the jury that Jeffrey also had a difficult time in the marriage. They discredited she, who couldn't defend herself because she was deceased. It came to light that in 2005, Ashley had received a drunk driving fine. Meanwhile, Jeffrey said he wanted to save their marriage. He bought a new house and was ready to have children, while Ashley had and send intimate pictures to your lover. Regarding the crime, Jeffrey said that he lost control, realized that all his efforts were in vain, and that Ashley had found someone else. He expressed his regret to his wife's family, saying that he regretted the pain he caused them. He mourned her loss and prayed for her soul. However, during the trial, it was mentioned that after his arrest, he did not inquire about his wife's well-being. Instead, he simply wanted to know the outcome of a recent football game. His attorney have adopted controversial tactics, even arguing that Ashley's injuries were largely caused by seizures brought on by alcohol withdrawal. To support this claim, an independent expert was brought in. In response, the assistant county medical examiner was called to testify. He reviewed evidence from the autopsy, describing Ashley's injuries in detail and stressing that her cause of death could not have been a fall. The prosecutor said that the defense's claim that the crime was committed accidentally was unreasonable. It was evident that Ashley wanted to escape from Jeffrey, her abuser, but out of love for her husband, wished to end things peacefully. Meanwhile, Jeffrey attacked her and hitting her repeatedly. He understood that he was causing great suffering to his wife. He ultimately finished the attack in the garage, where she lost consciousness. He saw how badly she was hurt, but chose to ignore it and failed to call for medical help right away. The prosecutor maintained that he intended to kill his wife. However, a new clue suddenly appears. Investigators discover that Ashley actually wants to save her marriage. Evidence showed she was taking medication to become pregnant and had supported buying a new home. She might have felt so trapped in the toxic relationship that she couldn't envision life without Jeffrey. Nevertheless, she eventually made the choice to leave. It's possible she hoped to leave without causing a rift, waiting for her husband to promise he would change and that everything would be okay. Victims of abuse often hold on to such unrealistic hopes. On January 19, 2009, Jeffrey Scott was found guilty of a second-degree crime. Even the judge disagreed with the jury's verdict. He criticized the jury for having voted 12 yes and 1 no on the original charge. One juror did not believe Jeffrey was guilty. Under state law, a unanimous verdict is necessary for a first-degree conviction. Ashley's family was also devastated. Jeffrey will serve 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Many feel this punishment is insufficient for someone who tortured a woman for years, isolating her from others, brainwashing her, and making her believe that she and her family were unworthy of being in his life. Ashley's father remarked that it was the worst thing that had ever happened to him, expressing his love for his daughter and stating that if she had died of natural causes, he could have eventually accepted it. However, he expressed his pain when he realized that his daughter had died a cruel death caused by Jeffrey and that he would never accept it.